Robert, can you hear me?
Hi Pam, can you hear us?
Oh, yes, it's
Hello?
Owen. Yeah, I'm just trying to. How do I? Um,
Did you need to mute?
no, I wanted to put a background on and I can't, or at least
Ah, right.
blur it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting evening in the Town Hall in the City of Colchester. Welcome members of the public and visiting councillors. Nice to see you all. Housekeeping. There are no practice evacuations planned this evening, but if an alarm does sound, please evacuate the Town Hall down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then onto the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being streamed live and there will be an on-demand version as well for us all to catch up on. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is obviously okay, but if your phone goes off then you'll be fined and that money will go to the Mayor's charities. So if you could just quickly check and make sure that you've not got your exciting ringtones on, that'd be really cool. We may have a break at 7:30 if we require one, and we'll keep a track on the time. I am Councillor Darius Laws. I represent Rural North Ward and I'm the chairman of this panel tonight, and we will walk around the room and find out who is here, and we will start randomly at the leader of the council, please.
Thank you, very kind. Thinking leader of the council.
Martin Goss on the portfolio holding for waste and for neighbours.
I'm Rosa Tamfield, the Head of Neighbourhood Services for Colchester City Council.
John Callett, Business Improvement Manager, Neighbourhood Services.
Owen Howell, clerk to the committee.
Andrew Weems, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Dennis Willits, Lexton and Braeswick Ward.
Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward, and this evening I'm substituting for Councillor Thomas Rowe.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch.
Faith Smalls, Old Heath, The Hive and Rowhedge.
Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward.
Tracy Arnold representing Stanway.
For the benefit of people watching at home, we just have a slight technical issue with audio. I'm going to busk it, so that might be of use to the guys that are trying to resolve that matter, but we won't continue until we know confidently that everyone is able to participate. So what should we talk about? Is this useful, gentlemen, if I just keep talking? I can talk to you about how disappointing it was last night when I went out for a chili con carne on the high street, and my preferred public house of choice took chili con carne off the menu. That was really disappointing. So alternatively, I went over to the Curzon and got a margarita, which I ate in the rain, whilst having an online meeting with Councillor Dundas and friends here, which was a great event. We'll talk about other things shortly. I'll keep going. The summer's here. Really grateful that the summer has returned. Although many of us in this room might find ourselves rather busy in the next few weeks, thanks to political events. But I'm not cancelling my holiday, so some people will be pleased to hear that I will be not in Colchester for the duration, as I have a family holiday. Thank you very much also to the leader of the council for being here this evening. I know that he's an incredibly busy individual and he doesn't have to be here, and it's good that he's here. That's not really busking, actually, that's quite sincere. And I will keep talking if this is useful. Perhaps a career in late night radio beckons, if I can fill this like this. Certainly haven't got the face for TV, but I might be able to do radio. What else can we talk about? I haven't got a kitchen sink at the moment because I'm currently refurbishing my kitchen, and that's really not very good news. Makes washing up really hard, and some difficult choices around what do you do with the peanut butter jar. Do you wash it up in the garden, or do you put it on a shelf and deal with it another time? Are we there yet?
Possibly so.
Okay. We will find a way.
Share microphones.
I think it may help if we have them closer. No? That one works.
Yeah, just have to go to the John,
that
have to
work?
go to the have your say if he's
Just clearing the old cobwebs out of it, I think.
it's working now.
Testing, 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 testing.
321, 321.
Okay, I think we're technically there. So after that brief interlude, I'll try and get my bearings back. We've gone around the room and welcomed everyone here. That's great. We've heard that there is a substitution this evening, and that is Councillor Dundas here in place of Councillor Rowe. It should be pointed out that this is it's a supplementary meeting, so I'm sure that Councillor Rowe would have been here, but I know that he has a family holiday booked, and this is an additional meeting, so that's why he couldn't be here. Item 3, urgent items, there are none. Item 4, declarations of interest.
Yes.
That's you, Councillor Willits, go for it.
I have no disclosable pecuniary interest, but I would declare that I'm a professional musician playing bass guitar, organ, and occasionally the piano accordion.
And that's relevant to something else that will come this evening, so thank you for that. Item 5, minutes, there are none to approve. General, have your say. Item 6, we have one member of the public who would like to say something, so I will invite Mr. Paul Smith to step up to the microphone there, the Have Your Say microphone. You have an opportunity to say a few words. Depending on what you talk about, we may respond to you now or later. Make sure you hit the button, and I'll let you know when. Just for the benefit of your understanding, you get 3 minutes. You will hear a bell at 2 minutes to indicate it's your final 60 seconds. And you can respond if we respond to you if you'd like, but we'll see how it goes. Over to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologies for reading from this, but I want to stick to my 3 minutes. So my name is Paul Smith, and I'm a resident of Highwards. I want to make a few statements which will lead to questions, 4 of them, for the committee on the item Garden Waste Charging Scheme. Firstly, cost of living crisis. We all acknowledge that there is a cost of living crisis, and the Council's introduction of the Garden Waste Charging Scheme is adding costs to the residents, while the Council will enjoy an increased tax receipt from us. Can you therefore explain this charge that is not helping the residents with the cost of living crisis? Second, the recycling of waste. Currently, the City Council is reporting that 55% of all collected waste is recycled. However, this is less than the comparable average for the other authorities in Essex, who report 70% in their recycled waste. Colchester City's Garden Waste Charging Scheme is reported in your reports to further reduce the Council's overall recycling delivery, which I suggest is unacceptable, and the Council needs to rethink their recycling policies. Thirdly, the financial business plan. I have reviewed the committee papers through the various committees that there are in the public domain, and I can see no inclusion of Colchester City Council's reducing income receipt of recycling tax credits from Essex County Council, based on the reduced green waste tonnage being received by the Council's composting contractor. I therefore suggest the financial business plans needs to be reviewed in more granular detail and made more publicly available. Then the fourth question is the Highwards flyer. As mentioned, I am a resident of Highwards, and I was surprised to receive an election flyer from the Labour Party, stating that Labour do not support the green waste charge. However, can the committee explain this political rhetoric when it is clearly recorded in the approval of the Council's budget that Labour, Liberal and the Green Party all supported the adoption of the Green Waste Charging Scheme? And it was only the Conservatives that voted against the green waste. Can you please explain, Chair? Thank you.
Mr. Smith, thank you very much. A number of points that I'm sure are going to be discussed during the substantive this evening. Your political point you made at the end was you made the answer yourself. You cited minutes that are a matter of public record. We welcome your contribution this evening. We welcome you to stay and enjoy the conversation. But if it's okay with you, the direct points you've raised, I will make sure that are covered during the conversations tonight. Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provision. There are none. Item 8, cabinet or portfolio decisions called in for review. There are none. Item 9A, items requested by members of the panel or other members, and we do indeed have a request from Councillor Willits regarding Castle Park and its fantastic Victorian bandstand and some higher charges associated with it. So I will now hand over to Councillor Willits, who will make the case for why he's brought this matter to the panel tonight.
Chairman, at the last council meeting, there was a have your say session in which several speakers were aggrieved at the council's policy of making a substantial charge, substantial in relation to the size of the bank accounts of the charities and musical groups who wish to use the bandstand. And although the leader of the council made some helpful remarks about it, I thought it would be useful to ask Scrutiny panel to clarify or attempt to clarify the policy on charging for such items as hire of the bandstand, which was provided by the council for local musicians in the first instance, the bands of the garrison to play music in Castle Park for the pleasure of those people who attend and promenade through what is a magnificent jewel in the crown for the city. I think most boroughs or cities do not charge for use of their bandstands. It was never intended, as I understand it, that there should be a charge. But then, because we find that the lettings income for Amphora are down because the Moot Hall is out of service, they are looking for every possibility to make a charge. And I think we should have a decided policy. For instance, we don't make a charge for walking through the Castle Park gates, but those have to be maintained and painted just like the bandstand. And I think we need to clarify which assets of the council can be used to leverage funds out of the public, the general public, and which assets are there to enable the general enjoyment of many parts of the city in a way that has been done in the past. So I would ask Scrutiny panel to include this item on the agenda, and that we have a report on the policy of charging for what most people see as community assets, which should be available free of charge to those who are just enjoying the ambience of our wonderful city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. Before I offer a view, I'm just looking around the room to see if anyone is deeply offended by what they've heard, or if they are minded that actually it's a sensible proposition. Go for it.
Could someone remind me how much it costs to use the bandstand?
I'm not totally sure because I haven't tried hiring it, but I think it was in the order of about £250, although that may have been reduced because one of the complaining organisations was in fact a charity, and a discount it can be given under those circumstances, but that's third-hand information, Chairman, and it's a good question how much does it actually cost, but I think it's the principle that I'm interested in, whether a feature of Castle Park, which has always been available for people to go and play there for the benefit of the people, should suddenly have a fairly large charge. So it's the policy issue I think we're looking at.
Councillor Willits, I'm minded to support your polite request for a report on this matter, but I will just look to Councillor. Sure.
I just think if a band of maybe a dozen or 20 brass players, you divide that by 20. Do I divide 200 by 20? It's not that much, really. I don't think that's unreasonable. And also, maybe by nature of the cost, you kind of ensure that you actually get bands playing on the bandstand and not, hacks with an acoustic guitar singing Mr. Brightside covers or whatever. Just saying.
Quite keen on Mr. Brightside by the Killers, actually. I think we, unless there's an objection here, I think we do need to see a report on this, unless there's an objection. Okay, let's hear from the portfolio holder, Councillor Goss, who I think will probably add some value on this one.
Always add value and lots of facts. So the background to this is that 4 years ago, the council and Castle Park team worked together with the cafe in the park, and they sponsored, in effect, for bands to play, so there was no cost. And then around 2019, the cafe withdrew that sponsorship and would no longer pay for the bands via sponsorship. So the current situation is that the bandstand falls under Castle Park's team's remit. However, the bookings are organised by Colchester Events, which of course is Amphora Trading. It's correct that there is a charge for use of the bandstand. This is within our agreed fees and charges, which I think were published actually back in February. So they've been published for some time. And it's something that many other authorities do, charging for the use of their assets. And for us in Colchester, not only have we needed to make significant savings, which will be in the next item, of course, we have income generation targets that we have to meet as part of our transformation agenda. However, during 2023, working together with the council and the events company, we've been able to gain sponsorship again for the costs to underwrite the cost of performances on the bandstand, and have developed a programme of 6 concerts and events, including several incubators for new and emerging talents, meaning that bands and musicians have not had to pay for the hire this year. So to reconfirm, if a band or individual or charity or otherwise were to contact the events company looking to book time on the bandstand, they would not be charged. The reason being that we've underwritten the higher cost through sponsorship. So we've gone back to what we were doing prior to 2019. That's a positive answer, I would hope. And therefore, if you want to scrutinise it, you'll be scrutinising something that's now back to what it was and free of charge again.
Councillor Willits, do you accept that answer, or would you still like a written report?
It is very good news delivered by Councillor Goss for the musicians of Colchester, but of course the sponsorship ran out in the past, which resulted in this problem. New sponsorship has been found, which temporarily alleviates the need for bands to play. And I think there should be, I'm looking for the clarification of a policy on use of what are effectively community assets. And the bandstand is perhaps just one typical one. We may be able to find others. And I would like to see a clear policy guidance on what assets can be leveraged for profit and contribution towards the cost of running our essential services, and what assets are effectively in the public domain, can be used at any time. For instance, you can go into Castle Park, most of it at any time, there is no charge. Perhaps that is a position which would be most helpful, and perhaps sponsorship is always useful, but I think we should clarify the policy on it rather than an ad hoc position of when sponsorship is available, no charge is made. If the sponsorship falls through, then I'm afraid the musicians will have to pay up again.
I think I hear the answer, so we will have to look at that in the form of a written report, and we'll have a look at the work programme and squeeze it in. It won't necessarily be a long item, but let's satisfy the request from Councillor Willits, which is reasonable. Okay. Right. Item 10, garden waste charging scheme. So we do have a number of speakers on this item. We also have a written submission from a councillor who couldn't be here. So we will have those that are here first. Let's have Councillor Dave Harris, please. And Councillor Harris, and to all those that wish to speak tonight, it might be that we take your submissions on block and then respond to them on block if they are on the same theme. I hope you won't be offended by that. But if there is something that is of a particular acute annoyance or contribution you would like addressed, then perhaps put the hand up a little firmer and I'll do my best. But I think that there might be a theme here. Over to you, Councillor Harris.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for that preamble. I would, however, say in retort to that, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't negate what I'm about to say and what I want to say, and the points that I and others may want to repeat along the way. It just strengthened it. For me, it's about parity, equality and fairness. My own ward, my own estates that I share the streets with are objecting to this because in the theme that what it's done, because what's happened is that some of my estates, in my own estate, we have wheelie bins. In the Willows estate next door does not have, and other estates across the patch have and have not, as the case may be. As you go through those estates, people are offended that they've had to be thought about charging for a wheelie bin when another neighbour just a few streets away is not being charged. That's the first point. And whether it's about charging because you need to is irrelevant. You just need some parity, some equality. I would recite to you, of course, some details about a nurse that rang me this weekend, just gone, who's on the Willows estate, who has not got a wheelie bin. Has not got, and it means that she'll be charged. Now, she's on a low income. She was explaining to me it would make a big difference to her. She wants to take a full and proper part in recycling, as we all should do, shouldn't we? And she feels she's been penalised on a low income. Now, there are people that will be able to afford and probably won't notice, but this lady will do. Then this afternoon, after I finished a full and proper day here at the council meeting earlier this afternoon, a lady from Shrub End, from Coates Hutton Road, rang me saying that she's on universal credit, doesn't know how she'll manage and doesn't feel that she could take her recycling to the tip, got no way of composting and was stuck in a very cleft stick. And what answer do I give that poor woman? It's difficult to answer that plea. How can I cope? How can I do this? I've got no way of composting. I can't get things to the tip. And I say, strap them in a rucksack and walk up the Shrub End tip. And she felt rather aggrieved as well that she's going to be charged not just for that personal lady for the bin, but also for the fact she's got to pay an annual fee. Now, for me, I can afford a bin. My neighbour and I will get off lightly because we will share under the rules at one bin between the two of us because neither of us fill up a bin. Great. So that's wonderful. And I'm guessing there are some residents that will be absolutely fine. But what I'm appealing to you, there are many residents in my ward that I represent, the people who've spoken to me and my inbox. I'm sure the portfolio holder and other people in this room have got no doubt loads of emails about this in their inbox. I know I certainly have. My own family, in one case, lobbied me. So you can imagine the look of wrath that I got given from people in my own family who felt rather aggrieved as well. So parity, people are objecting to this per se, and they want some sort of equality across the piece. And I'd like an answer, please, about what you tell those people who can ill afford, that already struggle with cost of living, already struggle with income, people in some cases that have had to go to a food bank being told they've got to pay for a wheelie bin and pay a yearly charge. What do we say to those people? For me, it's clear it needs a rethink, And that's where I'm taking my stance. And you'll probably hear other people say variations of what I'm saying, but be a church, first of my nickels, here I am making that point to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'm now going to call Councillor Tim Young.
Thank you, Chair. Evening panel, nice to see you all. Like Councillor Harris before me, and I'd like to associate myself with everything that Dave just said. I'm speaking here as a Greenstead Ward councillor, but also personally, I've always been against charging for garden waste, including when I was the portfolio holder. In fact, when I was the portfolio holder and we had this discussion, my brother was the head of service. It caused a bit of family difficulties, but I was always firmly and still am against charging for garden waste. I've spoken against the introduction of them publicly in council and at group meetings. So you may well ask, why did I vote for the budget that included garden waste charges? 3 reasons. 1, subject to the Labour whip. I haven't broken the Labour whip in 31 years as a councillor. I wasn't about to start a few months ago. Secondly, it's traditional for the mayor to support a legally set budget. I was the mayor at the time when the budget came through, and so I voted for it for that reason. And 3, and vitally, the garden waste charge was of course a small but very important component of an otherwise reasonable budget. So to bring in a charge for a service that has been up until now free is difficult to justify. I understand and absolutely appreciate the budget pressures caused by the cuts to local government by first the coalition government and then successive Conservative governments. But this needs to go back to the drawing board, as Councillor Harris so rightly said. It's not fair and it's regressive. Many residents in Greenstead, and I know this for the work I do with the food bank, can barely afford to eat, let alone pay more for their garden waste to be collected. So like me, many of them won't pay it or opt in to the service. We only put garden waste out 2 or 3 times a year, so it's not worth it for me to pay it. So I'll either go to Shrubbing Civic Amenity Site or some composting centre, and we have got nowhere to store a wheelie bin. Some of Greenstead, like some of Beerchurch, was not included in the wheelie bin rollout, which was also, I think, a fundamental error. Just one of the rounds, I think, didn't fit. So especially as we were one of the wards that overwhelmingly supported the introduction of wheelie bins. So I've been consistent on this, always been against it, continue to be against it. And I won't be saying one thing on the streets of Colchester and another thing in the town hall. I will stick to that, what I've always believed in. Also, I don't believe it's the scrutiny panel's function to decide or recommend an option. That must be a decision for Cabinet. I believe it is, and you will know this as the chair, the scrutiny panel's role to make suggestions and comments, but not to deliver an option to the Cabinet. My long-held opinion is that garden waste charges should not be introduced. Cabinet must find another way. Officers have admitted that there is likely to be an increase in fly tipping and that some garden waste will now end up in black bags. That's not good for the environment, nor this council's key performance indicators. It certainly doesn't chime with tackling the climate emergency. So I would ask you, I'd urge you all in this room, please, for social, economic and environmental reasons, send this back to the Cabinet for a thorough and comprehensive rethink. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Young, and I think special praise actually to you for acknowledging that you did vote for it, but you have justifiable reasons as to why. I think that was the right thing to do there. Okay, I now call Councillor Scott Butell, please.
Thank you. Good evening. As you can see, I come prepared with my piece of paper. So that's how I stick to topic and don't go off at a tangent. I wanted to let the panel know that I was recently contacted by a Stanway gentleman who was worried about the garden waste charges. He is concerned because he's in receipt of pension credit and with the cost of living crisis, he's struggling to cover his increasing costs. He couldn't see how he could afford to pay the additional cost for setting up and collection of his garden waste. We discussed the proposed options that had already been looked at, for example, sharing with his neighbour. He is a proud and independent man, and although very elderly, proactively caring for his garden plays a huge part in keeping his independence. He was anxious that he'd no longer be able to do so. Earlier today, I had a fabulous meeting with the Age Well East team, finding out about the phenomenal work that they are doing to support our residents. Their mission is to support and empower people to age well. I asked them what the impact of these charges would be on someone like my gentleman, and they advised that caring for their garden can often help people to remain connected and invested in their environment, active, and on days when they may feel less well, they have the opportunity to look out on a garden which boosts their sense of well-being and positivity. They went on to say that we feel and have found out that these activities can help to prevent decline by providing the means to maintain an active and engaged lifestyle, and that may well be particularly the case for people living alone and on fixed incomes. What we find as a local charity is that the more connected with, what they find as a local charity, that the more connected with positive and preventative activities people are, greater the prospect of them remaining independent and well, and lower the prospect of their needs increasing towards the more acute and expensive support of care. Please could Scrutiny recommend to Cabinet that there is an option included for elderly people living alone and on means-tested fixed income to enable them to continue looking after and caring for their garden, and as such, enriching their lives and maintaining their independence. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. I now call Councillor Scordis, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a very tough topic to discuss tonight, which, as you say, was voted through in the budget. I wasn't there myself on the night, but it was voted through in the budget by 3 of the groups. And from what we've heard from the Conservative candidate for Highwoods, the Conservatives don't really have an alternative. It's just stop this. They're not really recognising the financial implications. However, what I am disappointed with the paper is that we do have little options here. It is essentially, here's what you have and here's where you have to make up your mind. For example, I have mooted the idea of perhaps, rather than charging for garden waste to make savings, we could look at suspending the garden waste service for 6 months of the year, perhaps from, let's say, October to March, when it's used less frequently. And if people did want their rubbish collected, they could look at using the current special collection service that we do have, which would raise us a small income. I don't know if that's workable because I haven't received the figures of that, but that's just an idea to put out there of whether it's a way of not charging people during a cost of living crisis. Tonight as well, I think it's really important we look at the practicalities of this as a scrutiny panel. I think it's up to you to pick apart where you think there are weaknesses in this proposal, because there are questions of, are we ready yet? We put it in the budget to go through it January, but realistically, are we ready? Because if we get this wrong, it could be catastrophic. Like any marketing tool, it could just collapse and we won't reach the targets that we need to financially. So I think it's important as a scrutiny panel, you look at are there weaknesses here that we need to pick apart? For example, are wheelie bins acceptable everywhere? Or do we think we may have to look at a different option? It might be that even smaller wheelie bins are not an option on some areas, such as, for example, East Street, which is a very narrow road and would be a bit chaotic on rush hour with people even with a small wheelie bin out. So for me, they're the main things to look at. I'm sure people will raise the issue of charging and financial implications, and I'll leave that to others to do. But for me, I think there's the practicalities. We need to know whether we're going to get this right, because it's really important if we're pushing this through, whatever we decide, we get it right in January, or if we have to go after, it's ready to go and people have a good experience. Because if people have a bad experience, that word spreads. And as I say, it could have serious financial implications if we do get it wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Scordis. Can I please now call Councillor Jocelyn Law?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak today really on my concerns about the fairness of the charging structures that we've seen for garden waste. As a local resident in Highwoods and as a councillor for Highwoods, I know that there seems to be some disparity and that some areas of Colchester have already been provided with garden waste wheelie bins in the past for free, and yet in areas such as Highwoods where wheelie bins, where appropriate, were not introduced. I'd like to understand a bit more, and I wonder if officers or portfolio holder here today can explain to me why we appear to have this hybrid system for collecting waste across Colchester. I know many other local authorities tend to have a more coherent system, so I would be grateful to really understand why we're in the situation we're in at this point in introducing this service as it is. I just want to sort of reinforce as well what others have said about the impact and the way in which this is being introduced. And this does cause a lot of concern and worry for residents. It just comes to mind a couple that I've spoken to recently that are really concerned, because if you're on a low or a fixed income, such as being a retired person, it really does have a big impact on you. I know one retired man whose garden is his pride and joy, and he loves it because people come up to him and tell him how wonderful it is, but he's really concerned about how he's going to manage with the new system being introduced and the charges for the bin. And another resident who I spoke to, 88 years young, I really hope that I aspire to be like this wonderful resident. She loves gardening, but again, she's got concerns, but also she's been a bit confused about how things have been introduced. She just is fearful for the future. And so I just would again like to reiterate, it's really important that this system can be cleared up, that residents can be clearly communicated with, because often it's just the fear of the unknown. They need to know what's being introduced, and also they just want to be treated fairly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Law. I'm now going to move over to a written statement submission from an absent councillor. We will have that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have got a statement to read out on behalf of Councillor Thomas Rowe, a member of the panel, but unfortunately, due to a pre-existing commitment, he isn't able to make it at the meeting tonight. So, Councillor Rowe writes, as a representative of the concerned residents across our borough who view the garden tax as a direct affront, in a time when we all grapple with economic pressures, the imposition of additional taxes upon homeowners with gardens appears as an unjust burden. The weight of existing taxes, coupled with the diminishing quality of services, leaves us feeling that our contributions are disproportionately high and our needs inadequately addressed by the current administration, which seemingly channels its energy towards pet projects at the expense of delivering genuinely valuable services. With a sense of urgency, I call upon the members of this esteemed committee to advocate for the swift termination of this ill-conceived garden tax scheme. Its conception seems plagued by hasty decision-making and a disregard for its potential consequence. Moreover, its timing raises valid concerns about its appropriateness and its implications for our community. At its core, the scheme purports to bolster revenue generation, yet it bears the unmistakable mark of a tax grab. I, for one, hold reservations about its ability to deliver on its revenue expectations. This scepticism is compounded by the proposed purchase of new diesel lorries, a move that contradicts the principles we hold dear as we confront the climate emergency. This measure risks not only financial inefficacy, but also a decline in the collection of green waste, a situation at odds with our environmental commitments. It is with great consternation that I observe the expenditure of significant sums on what can only be described as vanity projects. The mile-end path to nowhere, the ill-fated district heat network, and the scarcely known commercial broadband venture stand as glaring examples of fiscal irresponsibility. It is deeply disheartening to witness a lack of discernment in the allocation of resources, particularly when the Council laments financial constraints. Last year, promises were made to review capital projects, yet little progress seems evident on this front. The delays in addressing these matters only serve to affirm the inefficiency that pervades the decision-making process of the Liberal Democrat cabinet. Such inefficiency hardly surprises me, given the sluggishness with which portfolio holders respond to the inquiries raised by councillors in full council sessions. In my view, waste collection stands as a fundamental service to be provided by the council. If genuine financial constraints indeed plague the council, I propose a reconsideration of council allowances before burdening our hard-working residents with taxes for essential services. Perhaps a direct experience of the financial implications would inspire more prudent fiscal decisions, fostering a sense of responsibility towards taxpayer funds. I implore this committee to take a firm stance against these proposals, sending them back to the Liberal Democrat Cabinet for reconsideration. It is time for them to acknowledge the ramifications of their decisions and take ownership of the situation they have inadvertently created. Councillor Rowe's statement ends there.
Thank you for that submission, and I have to acknowledge that that strayed a little bit away from this evening, and I will give the leader a chance tonight to give some macro context to before the portfolio holder and officers. So I know that that strayed away. I'm sure you'll want to respond appropriately. We do have Councillor Sue Lissimore online, who I think would like to say a few words. We'll give her a few extra seconds just to test her microphone and make sure it's all technically working. But good evening, Councillor Sue Lissimore, all the way from sunny Prettygate.
Good evening, panel. Can you hear me okay? You can. Lovely. Thank you very much. I have to say I'm stunned and flabbergasted by the earlier speakers. All Lib Dem and Labour and Green councillors at the budget meeting voted for garden waste charges. The actions were clear at the budget meeting, and if they weren't understood, the councillors should have voiced their concerns before they voted. Labour have even put a petition out against the change. The same Labour Party members who are councillors who voted for it in the council chamber. We've just heard from Labour councillors, residents ringing up, being aggrieved. But the Labour councillors voted for this. If they knew their residents couldn't afford it, why vote for it in the first place? However, the portfolio holders made it clear this charge will go ahead. There is no choice on the agenda for the garden waste charges to not go ahead. Topic 1 is the pricing model. I'm a little bit confused by this, I have to say. There is a lot of confusion and consternation from residents about those who've already got brown bins and have got them for free. Why should they now have to pay? Topic 2, the benefit discount. There is no option to look at existing help that exists. The only option adds more costs to those not on benefits. Topic 3, flexibility should be the key on garden waste charges. Direct debits on both monthly and annual and online payments should be accepted. I'm not particularly good at remembering to pay things. I have to put in calendar items and whatever. If we therefore want this to be a charge that residents keep paying to keep a service, then there should be the flexibility to allow residents to have it how they want it. And topic 4, I would say both options. There's no option on these areas where there is no access for wheelie bins. this has not been discussed at all. This is very disappointing for terraced housing areas, for example. And this is cutting the council's nose to spite its face, because it's reducing the amount of users that can actually use this service. So I think we have forgotten here that flexibility needs to be the key. If it is decided tonight to go back to Cabinet to overlook this whole charge, I would be complete and absolute agreement, and I'm sure a lot of residents out there would also be in complete and utter agreement. There are other services. I always say each council, whoever's in charge, has X amount of money. It's what you do with that money. And what the Lib Dems here, with Labour's backing, have decided to do is charge for garden waste. If that can be looked at again, then the residents of the whole Colchester Borough would be exceedingly pleased. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lissimore. I think that concludes the contributions from visiting councillors, members of the public. Before I open this one up, I'm just going to contextualise it myself because I can, and it is right to acknowledge that this was voted through in a budget meeting of the full council by Labour councillors supporting the Liberal Democrat leadership, and the Conservative, the opposition group, voted against. That is a fact. I'm stating it, but I do wish to exonerate a couple of individuals that are in this room, in particular Councillor Scordis. He is a Labour councillor, but he was not at that meeting, and also Councillor Smalls was not elected at the time. So there have been some comments already tonight about how all Labour councillors voted for this, and that isn't the case. I just want to acknowledge that. So Councillor Smalls, you haven't had an opportunity to have an input into this yet. This evening, though, is not really an opportunity to necessarily cancel 1.3 million worth of revenue in a budget year 2, 1.6 year 3. Actually, the budget's already been set, and it's been approved not just by the full council, but also in Cabinet. And now the portfolio holder has the very tricky deliberations around some of the implementation. And effectively, what we're looking at here this evening in the report is almost like a seesaw, because we've still got to balance it. We've still got to make it work. That said, there is a lot to talk about tonight. I've made notes about some of the salient points that were raised this evening. I will reference my notes and make sure that they are covered. So rest assured your contributions will be covered, but I'm sure officers and the portfolio holder have already that in hand. Okay, I'm going to open up by allowing the leader of the council, who's kindly given up his evening to be here tonight, to introduce the context around this, and then hand over to the portfolio holder, who ultimately is the decision maker with the support from his, or our officers, I should say.
Chairman,
Councillor Willis.
Can I ask a question first on the procedures we're adopting this evening? Yeah. It was most helpful that you clarified just what the scrutiny panel is doing this evening. We heard many speeches earlier on from members of the public about the pitfalls of this scheme and their opposition to it, and we've also heard that it's absolutely essential to do it to balance the budget. Members of the public spoke about the wider issues. No member of the panel has spoken about the wider issues. And I think if we are going to address any of the wider issues this evening, it should only be fair that the members of the panel can also express their opinions about this. Because it would seem nonsensical that members of the public come along, raise issues at this panel, and we are the panel, not members of the public, and these are fundamental points about issues that have already been taken. And if the public can come along and have answers to these, then I think members of the panel should also now be able to address the political issues that have been raised this evening. Otherwise, it might be thought by members of the public that we are sort of neutral on the matter and we have no strong views on it. But overall, Chairman, you are absolutely right. The decisions have been taken, and what we're here to do this evening is not address the policy issues, but to address the specific questions which the portfolio holder has given us this evening. And that is what we're here to do. That is what is on the agenda. I think that's why we have the monitoring officer here to keep us in good order. But if we're going to enter into a general debate about whether garden charges are good, bad, and should have been implemented, and whether the leader and the cabinet were right or wrong, it only seems fair that the members of the panel should also have an opportunity to use them as a punch bag before we get down to the serious issues that we should be discussing to help the portfolio holder in formulating his decision on how the scheme will proceed.
Councillor Willits, I'm prepared for a late evening, and I'm sure you are as well. We can have that tonight. Let's move on to the Leader of the Council.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Willits. I look forward to the body blows you've got lined up for me. I absolutely agree that if we talk about context, of course that opens up a conversation, but my context is tightly drawn around the reality that this proposal is meant to address. I love quoting Sue Lissamore, so I'll just sort of say stunned and flabbergasted are the words I could use, because I remember, like all members who were there on that day, how that budget debate went. I also remember, and many are choosing to forget, that we spent some months in looking at a whole array of choices and alternatives in front of us. We had former leaders of the council, we had an alumni session, we had small groups, we did a lot of joint cross-party work, absolutely accepting that it's the administration of the day that has to carry forward the budget and then have it tested in full chamber. But the decisions made in full chamber were made in the absolute light of that bigger picture. It was signed off then, it's got to be carried through now, and the walking away from it will not change the decision that was made in February collectively, which I would say was two things. One, an absolute acceptance that we had to fill a gap of £5.2 million in this year, with more to come in future years, and that there was no way, I've got 12 pages worth of savings measure to my left, that we could do that unless, with regret, we raised additional income. That's where we were. And I know, because many Conservative members were good enough to have the frank private conversation, there was a lot of understanding for the decisions that were made, even if they weren't supported on the vote in full chamber. That's all I'll say about that, Chair. I'll just give you the context I promised you. So Q1 is due out very shortly. The Section 151 officer, our finance director, has given me a first set of headlines, and they're uncomfortable. The shortfall of income and overspending combination on our revenue budget is around £2 million. So in other words, we're behind at the moment the drag curve that takes us through to the end of the financial year. Now, it's right to say that that is first view, it's early. There are a number of offsets, there is work being done in some depth, which will, I hope, reduce that number. But the least that tells us is the challenge that we expected this financial year is still very much with us for reasons members would understand. We've got external factors which affect everybody, high inflation, rising homelessness costs, are currently forecast to be nearly 800k more than budget. We've got internal challenges which are up with our expectation or perhaps beyond. We've got the difficulty of reducing staffing levels. We've got pay constraint. Now, the Chief Executive has talked about this to all members, but let me just give you a couple of illustrations of difficult decisions already being made. So, a constraint on pay for senior staff. A tailored pay award that helps those most in need, a freeze on recruitment, the Chief Executive taking a personal look at every attempt to fill a vacancy. These are not the decisions that you make lightly. This is a process that shows the determination in difficult circumstances to reduce cost, but it's an illustration of that pressure. I remind members, not only have we got that saving challenge, that 5.2 million this year, we're drawing on reserves to ensure that we balance the books this financial year. We have an extra £3 million worth of savings we need to make next year. Any administration of any colour and combination would have no choice but to face up to those challenges. Garden waste income is baked into that already difficult equation, which itself, as I've just summarily described, is under pressure. If we don't do that, then we have the same challenge we had in February, which is to say, what else could we do? I've thought about this today because I've had this conversation with a number of members privately, and I've said, tell me, what would you do? Intellectual rigour requires us not just to object, but have some form of suggestion about where we might go. I have heard nothing. Do we stop housing people if they're made homeless? Of course not. Well, we curtailed our expenditure. Well, I could say the better part of 800k. We're not going to go and do that. Nobody would support that. And we talk a lot about cost of living, we do some fantastic work. We get over £1 million out of the door to people in need. I suspect it's certainly many hundreds, it's probably over 1,000 people have been helped this last year. That's fantastic work by our staff, which would be supported by every councillor. That's another 300k. That's a choice that we make because that's the kind of council that we are. We could close leisure well. We talked about that last year. Many councils have closed their leisure and sports facilities. That would save us 600k or more. All I'm making plain, Chair and members, is that in a world of difficult choices, this was the one that we took together in February. Nothing since then has made it any easier to move away from that choice. But what we genuinely have asked this committee to do tonight is to give your best counsel to us about how we might do that. Now, we've provided a certain degree of structure around the options and choices to help the conversation, but it's generally put that way. If there are other points, I'm sure the portfolio holder will be listening. We take them on if we can. But the heart of this is those words, baked in to a huge challenge with which we are already struggling. We will get there, but it's going to be hard yards all the way through this year and next. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. And if I may say, in having the meeting this evening, we're having it with enough notice that there is time for that seesaw to be arranged. Because what we don't want to do is to have what I think you've indicated to us is that we wait till the last minute and then decide, oh, actually, let's call something in. You've given us enough notice to scope it. And I do feel for you because, as you've said, Labour councillors voted for this budget and are now putting out literature in Colchester trying to pretend that they're against it. And I think that's a bit disingenuous. So I didn't want to get political tonight, but I'm going to say it. And I think you're in a very, very difficult position. And hopefully now we've cleared the air and we've all got that off our chests, we can get into this detail and look at some of the serious choices that are before us around the implementation of this, because you have agreed you're going to do this. That's happening, okay? So with that, is there anyone else who wants to jump in? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, the budget last year, what amendment did the Conservatives propose for the budget meeting?
I'm going to disregard that comment. That's not what we're here for tonight.
Well, it's come up, and and you're mentioning it as well. I'm wondering, you could have proposed as far as I recall, you didn't propose an amendment when you could have. Why not? If you don't like the garden waste being in there, why didn't you propose amendment? Just saying.
The Conservative opposition group in the town hall voted against the budget. Okay, Labour councillors, not every Labour councillor, but Labour councillors supported the Liberal Democrat budget. I think you both have to own it. That's my point I'm making.
Well, I voted for the budget because legally we have to have a budget. And you agree that legally we have to have a budget, I'm sure. But if you disagree with the budget, why don't you propose an amendment? Anyone could.
Okay. Let's Let's move on. Let's move on. And let's hear from the portfolio holder and the officers about what we're here to do this evening.
Thank you. It feels like a merry-go-round rather than a seesaw, and I think some of the behaviours tonight that have been elicited and some of the contradictions that we've heard, I find quite frustrating. I just want to put that on record. You will also recall, because there seems to be a lot of amnesia in the room or amongst certain councillors and political parties, or one particular, that we actually looked at garden waste charges about 2 years ago when I was the portfolio holder during COVID. And in the end, we decided not to press ahead with it. But of course, the financial position has worsened significantly, partly due to COVID. And I have to say that at the time, even though I was responsible for trying to drive it forwards with the cabinet at the time, which was obviously with the Labour Party as well, I always said publicly I was never comfortable doing it or happy. And I will make those remarks again now. But when you are elected, and I have been elected nearly 16 years, and hopefully grown older and more wise, as a councillor, all 51 of us have a responsibility to act like adults and to take responsibility for those decisions that we make. And this decision is extremely difficult and it rankles with me. But at the end of the day, I'm elected, I've chosen to step up, and I have to make that decision along with other councillors. I just want to make that point, because some of the behaviour around this has been, I would suggest, not the best, and it puts the public off and it conflates and confuses, and that doesn't help any of us do our roles. We are 51 councillors, and I just wanted to make that point. So moving on to garden waste, one of the things that was mentioned previously was around parity or equality. I think those were Dave Harris's words and used by other councillors as well. And it's absolutely right that this is a difficult decision, and one of the big issues is, do we charge people that have already had a wheelie bin, 12,751 properties, or do we not? And for me personally, this is a personal view and I've always said it, I'm not quite sure how you can look somebody in the face that's had a wheelie bin for 6 years, since 2017 when they were rolled out, and that was funded a different way, and then try and charge them for it. But then I also take on board that people don't want to pay for a wheelie bin. So when devising this scheme, and the officers to my right, got that right, have worked extremely hard on this for some time, and there's in effect years of work that have gone into this, because we did the work several years ago during COVID when we were locked up in our houses, and obviously that work's been picked up and it's been matured and moved on. So there's been years of work gone into this. It's not just been thought up in a couple of months, and I think that's also a point worth making. We've also had extensive communication with other authorities, and you know, we haven't just dreamt up the charges. Sorry, I've got cramp in my leg now. We haven't just dreamt this up. We've tried to get the charging in line with what other authorities are, and we're about mid-league. We're not the most expensive, we're not the cheapest, but most councils charge for wheelie bins in one way or another. All councils that do this charge, and to put it in context, and I've said this many times, over 65% of councils and growing, because other councils in Essex are either looking at this or have done it, Braintree are looking at it, Basildon has done it, and they've had a 65% sign up in 2 months. 65%, it's exceeded what they expected. But other councils are having to do it. I would say that most councils are conservative that are charging, just to make a point, it's factual. And I would also say that over 83% of councils have some form of wheelie bin. So we are in a league table at the bottom where we're only partially wheelie bin driven, just to put it into context. Other towns and cities have terraced housing. We have wheelie bins at terraced housing now. I can point at it in Mile End, where there are wheelie bins that are accommodated where there is terraced housing, so we can make it work. We've tried in this set of proposals to be more flexible than other councils. We always do this in Colchester, and actually it's to our detriment sometimes. Other councils do not offer other size of wheelie bins. So we're going out of a standard 240 litre wheelie bin. Where we think that access is going to be difficult, we've reduced it to 140 litres, or where people have smaller gardens. Other councils do not do that, or the majority do not. They have a one size fits all. We've also gone out and said to try and make it more affordable and palatable, particularly for those with smaller gardens or for those on lower incomes, we will allow you to share wheelie bins. And again, other councils do not do that. I just wanted to put that into context to show that yet again our officers have tried to be innovative in difficult times to try and make this as palatable for our residents, and we are residents as well. And despite leaflets going out in Highwoods claiming that people in Mile End get free wheelie bins, no they don't, because I'm not on a wheelie bin route. So if I make this decision, I'll be buying a wheelie bin. End of story. So again, that's just to put that fact out there that no, not everybody in Mile End has a wheelie bin. I don't. So I just wanted to give those examples. We've benchmarked, we've listened, we've looked at the operational impact. And just to answer the point about buying a couple of new garden waste trucks. On the one hand, I heard some councillors speak earlier that, in fact, it was Councillor Jocelyn Law. On the one hand, she's saying, well, why have we got this hybrid system? It's confusing. But on the other hand, she's kind of saying, wheelie bins, you know, and you've got to pay for them. Well, you can't have both. So what we are doing to tackle that point is we are going to only do wheelie bins when we roll this out from January. What we are also doing, which you should all be aware of, is reviewing the way we operate our waste service, because it is hybrid, it is expensive, and it's not good for the health of our staff. We know the statistics that people on the black sack and garden waste routes have higher sickness levels.
Councillor Goss, point of clarity here, just for the benefit of people watching at home right now, and also for Councillor Law, who specifically wanted to know, how did we get to this hybrid point? Is it worth you just touching on that?
I will
Thank
do.
you.
Absolutely, no, brilliant point. So in 2017, when this was looked at, I think the councillor first off was Councillor Dominic Graham, then it was Councillor Jessica Scott Boutel, and then I think it's been me pretty much ever since, actually, lucky me. Apart from the year of the Conservatives for a year. I didn't do anything with it. So the reason that we got there is because I think, again, being Colchester, we were too flexible. I think Councillor Dominic Graham did a great job in trying to please and appease as many people as he could. Had it been me, I'd have just said, we're rolling them all out, we're doing it, and take the pain and just got on with it. If that had been me, probably. But the reason we've got the hybrid system is because we pushed it back on councillors. We tried to be adult about it and allow the councillors at the time to work with their communities to make those decisions. So that is why you have what you have. That's the answer. So, as I said, personally, I'd have rolled it all out. I'd have just done it, because that's what other authorities have done, including tendering. They rolled it out, and I think there are some areas where they didn't, just because operationally it wouldn't work in Clacton, in the city town centre. So that answers your question. But I wanted to make all these points. I wanted to just do benchmarking. I wanted to talk about how we've tried to be flexible. And in terms of listening, that report you've got tonight is the result of listening to councillors, talking about those on the lowest income, talking about disparity around, you know, do we charge everybody? Do we not charge everybody for wheelie bins? You could actually argue that it's not actually fair and equitable to charge somebody for a bin that they've had for 6 years. You know, those people probably will feel hard done by if we decide to charge everybody. So just to put that in context, equality and fairness works both ways, okay? Because I'm sure some people in Beerchurch will be a bit more hacked off because they probably thought they wouldn't have to pay for a bin. And, you know, bear that in mind. In terms of volume of emails in my inbox, no, actually, it's not been huge. I've probably answered more on social media, but not a huge amount, to be fair. And actually, it'd be interesting to hear councillors when they say they've been contacted a lot. Let's put it in context. Is it 10 emails, 2 emails, 5 emails, 100 emails, 1,000 emails? So, yes, I've had some emails, but some have been referred to me by councillors. But it's not a huge tsunami. And tonight there's one member of the public, also a candidate in the election in Highwoods. There's no other members of the public here, and this has been advertised. So if people felt strongly enough, they could have come here to have their say, and I would still encourage people to do so. But in terms of the paper itself, Rosa has got some slides that she'll take you through for the detail, but I just wanted to add some context, some comparison, and to try and answer some of those questions. Certainly in terms of fly tipping is down 20% year on year at this moment in time. Other authorities, again, we've asked the questions, have you seen a huge increase in fly tipping when you've introduced garden waste charges? On the whole, not really, no, is the answer that's come back. So again, we've tried to do our homework by speaking to people that have done this for many, many years. Some people have charged for garden waste for probably a decade or so. And the other point is government allows it. And under the Environment Act that was coming, the government at one point was mooting that they would remove allowing to charge for garden waste. But then, of course, all those 65% of councils objected, saying, well, if you do that, how are you going to replace the revenue income and deal with the operational cost? So the government has capitulated on that, and I don't think they'll be going forwards with it. So we are allowed to charge for garden waste because it's a non-mandatory service. In terms of the income and credits from Essex County Council, that's in the business case. We have included income still from depositing garden waste and recycling it into compost. That's included in the business case in the papers before you. So to say it wasn't included is untrue. It's in there. I think that's probably all I'm going to say. I was actually going to read out the entire list of names of all those that voted at full council for the budget. And I will, just for fact and clarity, I will, because I think it's fair. So all those in favour were Councillor Arnold, Barton, Bickersteth, Bloomfield, Chewer, Coleman, Corey, Cox, Fox, Rhymes, Cox and Fox, Gocher, Goss, Harris, Hogg, Jay, King, Kirkby, Taylor, Councillor Jocelyn Law, McLean, Pearson, Rippingdale, Scott Boutell, Smith, Spindler, Warnes, Julie Young, and the Mayor, T. Young. And there are some Conservative councillors listed that voted against. I will read those out because that's fair. So we've got Barber, Bentley, Buston, Chapman, Ellis, Hagan, Laws, Lissamore, McLean, Moore, Smithson, Sunnox, Tate, Willits and Wood. And as you pointed out, some councillors were absent from the meeting. But I do think it's also a fair point that no other budget submission was put in, and you do have that opportunity. And I think to finish, before Rosa does the detail, it's absolutely right that we've looked at all options. And some of the options, and I've said it quite bluntly, who do you want us to make redundant? Because that's the kind of conversation you have to hit the budget. So which staff would you like to say have lost their jobs if we didn't do this? Because that's fundamentally what it comes down to, and there's some of the options that, you know, we would have looked at as part of this, just to put this in context. Who do you want us to make redundant? 50 jobs. So, you know, just bear that in mind when picking apart things, but not having other solutions to fill that gap. No different than running a household budget. What do you cut? What do you stop buying? What holidays do you stop going on?
Thank you, Councillor Goss. Before Rosa, does any member of the panel wish to? Okay, I'm going to have Councillor Smalls first.
I've got a number of practical questions, but will that be more appropriate after Rosa's presentation? Yes.
Councillor Dundas, do you need to say anything?
Thank you. Yes, I've got lots of questions on the business plan, but I'll leave those for a minute. I don't really want to do too much politics tonight, but I wanted to pick up on one thing Councillor Goss said about the Conservatives and their year. What the Conservatives did do is that they left the finances in a position where the current leader of the council felt able to propose a budget amendment freezing council tax. So they obviously thought we'd done a rather good job.
Rosa, you've got some slides for us. We will break around the 7:30 mark or thereabouts, but We're in your hands now.
Okay, thank you. I'll just wait for our governance officer to prepare the slides. My first slide, I was going to talk through the decision-making process as to where we've got to today, but I think we've done that already. So I will quickly move on to the second slide. But just to recap, the panel today are being asked to review a number of topic areas ahead of agreement to any adjustments by the portfolio holder following the delegated authority that came from Cabinet. So before I explain more about the topics that we are asking you to consider, I'd just firstly like to talk a moment about the current service. So the council currently collects garden waste from over 70,500 curbside properties, and an additional 1,100 properties are classed as hard to reach. So I'll explain a bit more about what hard to reach means in a moment. Across 86,800 properties within Colchester. And the cost to deliver that garden waste service is in excess of £1.8 million. Now, as we've already discussed so far this evening, the council provides a wheeled bin-based garden collection service to a certain percentage of the residents in Colchester, and that totals 12,700 properties. That's 18% of all of our garden waste curbside collection. So 82% of curbside collection properties in Colchester are currently using the reusable bags for that service. And the wards which have wheeled bins include Mile End, Greenstead, St Anne's and St John's, Old Heath and the Hythe, Beerchurch, Shrub End and Stanway. On to the next slide, please. To service that mix of different collection methodologies, i.e. the reusable bags and wheeled bins from those curbsides, the council has to run a mixture of fleet. And I thought I'd demonstrate this with the vehicles because sometimes our terminology isn't all that clear. So to deliver the current garden waste service, we have one bin lift refuse collection vehicle. That's the one that's on the left of the screen, with the orange attachment to the back. We use that vehicle to collect from the households who currently have wheeled bins. Then we have 4 open back vehicles, the middle vehicle there. And in addition to address capacity need that we have on our wheeled bin routes, we also run another route on a Friday. So we bring in a second RCV to collect on a Friday. Then lastly, there are areas of the borough which were classed as hard to reach. So it makes it difficult for us to send a HGV down. And so in those instances, we use cage vehicles, which is the vehicle on the right. And we've got 3 of those to serve. So the total vehicles, 1 bin lift, 4 open backs and 3 cage vehicles, plus some additional resource on Friday to collect the current garden waste service. Now, this mixture of vehicles makes the resilience of delivering the service really difficult, especially if the bin lift, the one on the left, is unable to run, because the open backs, the middle ones, aren't able to service those routes with wheeled bins. They don't have the mechanism to be able to lift the bins. Whilst crews that can service reusable sack routes with a bin lift, but we don't recommend it because, as you can appreciate, the lifting and stretching of the crew to collect those reusable bags and lift them into that orange mechanism will be really difficult. As we've already mentioned, crews working on black sacks and garden waste routes do have a higher level of sickness because of musculoskeletal injuries than those working on the wheeled bin routes, and research has consistently proven that the level of musculoskeletal injuries associated with using wheeled bins is lower. In addition, analysis that we've undertaken looking at those different collection methodologies shows that the level of missed bins from both forms of collections identifies that it's higher on sack rounds than it is on wheeled bins. So again, residents receive a much better service for those that are on wheeled bin routes. Next slide, please. So that's the existing service. What I'd like to just talk through now is the proposed scheme as was discussed with Cabinet. So the scheme aims to meet net revenue targets of 15,000 in the current financial year, 1.3 million in the next financial year, and 1.6 million in the year after. To meet these targets, it's essential that the service launches in January. Now, when the service launches in January, residents have a number of options. They obviously can opt into the garden waste service, but as already been discussed, residents can also join up with other residents and share the service between them if they don't feel that their current garden waste is sufficient enough, or they just want to share the cost. They can also compost at home, and we already have an agreement with Love Essex, where residents in Colchester can purchase a subsidised composter, and we're working actively with Essex officers to look at different ways of offering training, engagement, awareness, both face-to-face and online, for people to be educated in how to compost. We are also setting up a grant scheme within the council to enable communities to set up community composting schemes as well. So it's another alternative that hopefully won't cost residents. And lastly, as already been discussed, residents could take the waste to the household waste recycling centres, or alternatively pay to dispose of the garden waste privately through a licensed waste carrier. Now, just going back to the figures that I've got on the screen there, they're based on residents receiving a wheeled bin only service. And just to reassure you, those residents that are on an assisted collection, so these are residents who find it difficult to present any of their waste, we have arrangements in place where we will support them and assist with those collections. Those assisted collections will continue with a paid for garden waste service going forward. There'll be fortnightly collections with a pause of 2 weeks over Christmas, as is already in place, and that just enables us to reallocate staff and vehicles onto the higher priority and volume routes, as you would expect over that busy period. And as I said, the service will launch in January 2024. Householders are going to be issued with a sticker each year, which will be placed on their bin, and that provides us with a visible backups for our onboard systems for the crews to make sure we're collecting from the right properties. And as I said, residents can share their bins if they think that better suits their needs. Extensive research has been undertaken with other authorities to help develop the proposals, avoid mistakes and maximise service performance. And these have been referred to throughout the report, and I'll mention a few this evening as well. Next slide, please. So, topics for discussion. It's requested that the Scrutiny panel consider and make recommendations to the portfolio holder for neighbourhoods and waste on the following topics of the garden waste scheme. So the pricing model, options around a discount for those that are on benefits, the financial process for residents, and the process for dealing with unwanted wheeled bins that residents already have. As will be explained in a moment, it's important to consider these topics in context to each other, but in order, as the pricing model will have an impact on your recommendations on the discount options and may have some impact on the process of dealing with unwanted bins. Next slide, please. So in considering these topics of the scheme and the recommendations to be made to the portfolio holder, the Scrutiny panel are asked to consider the time and deliverability of the recommendations, mindful that the service must launch in January and there will be public communication starting around October this year. To be mindful of the budget and the income to be secured from the recommendations. The simplicity and ease of explanation to our residents, but also the simplicity of delivering that operationally within the service. And then lastly, best practice and how the proposed recommendations or options compare. Note that these are not in any priority order, but are all of the things that need to be considered. Next slide, please. So we'll start with topic 1, the pricing model. So benchmarking has been undertaken on the pricing models of other authorities, and these are set out in Appendix A of the report. And it does indicate that the annual service charge proposed is similar to those other local authorities. The initial proposal set out to Cabinet is option A. This is where residents will have to pay a £10 one-off set-up fee, a £30 charge if a wheeled bin is required, and £55 service charge. So that's £95 in total for the first year if a resident needs a bin, £65 if they've already got one. And that model delivers an estimated revenue of just over £695,000. Option B is an alternative option and would charge all residents a one-off setup charge covering the expected cost for wheeled bins needed irrespective of whether the specific resident needs one. So in this case, the resident would pay a £35 one-off joining fee per bin and a £55 service charge as in option A. That would mean that all residents would be paying a £90 charge in the first year. This option would deliver an estimated gross revenue of just over £698,000.
Rosa, sorry, just for clarity here. So what you're saying is if you've already got a green waste bin, option B, you would be paying 90 and anyone getting a new bin would be paying 90.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to topic 2. So we are proposing to you a number of discount options for those residents that are in receipt of benefit. So the initial proposal to Cabinet, option A, is that no discount is offered to those on benefits. This would ensure income targets would be met and the pricing model costed options on the previous slide that we've just talked through. And in general, most authorities that we've spoken to do not offer discounts for residents as it's not a mandatory collection. So, in exploring options to offer a discount to residents, it's recommended that local council tax support, LCTS, entitlement could be easily identified and will automate a discount as part of the resident signing up to the garden waste scheme. Residents in 5.9% of the council's curbside properties are currently eligible for LCTS. So, just to be aware, any discount that is applied would impact the gross revenue, as we've already discussed. So if the council were to offer discounts for residents in receipt of LCTS, then the service fees would need to be increased to generate the same revenue from a smaller subset of full-priced residents. If it were recommended to support LCTS discounts, the council would need to layer the impact of discounting on top of the pricing options that we've just discussed to reassess the impact on those residents not receiving LCTS. So I'm just going to go through those two options in a moment. What they will do is demonstrate the changes, the costs for the residents following the option A and B of the previous slide. And the discount that we are considering is that those residents on local council tax support have a free sign up and also receive a free bin, and they'll also receive half price on the service charge. Sorry, next slide. So, if the panel are minded to recommend pricing model A from the first set of slides on topic 1, where the resident pays a £10 setup charge, £30 for a wheeled bin and a £55 service charge, if a discount is applied, so free wheeled bin and half price service for local council tax support residents, it would result in those not on local council tax support, on the left-hand side, having to pay £12.50 as a one-off setup charge, the £30 for the wheeled bins, and the service charge cost would increase to £56.72. So in total, they'd be paying £99.22 in the first year, which is a £4.22 increase on the original proposal. The local council tax support residents, as I say, would not have to pay the setup fee or bin, and they would have a half price annual service charge of £27.50. So that's if the panel are minded to go with option A of the topic 1, where the wheeled bin option is separate. If we go to the next slide, if the panel are minded to go with option B of the first topic, where all residents pay the same joining fee and same service charge, those residents not on council tax support will see their joining fee increase from £35 to £37.20 and their service charge increase from £55 to £56.72. So they'll be paying a total of £93.92 in the first year, which is a £3.92 increase. And again, in this option, those residents on local council tax support will have a free setup fee, no wheeled bin, and half price annual service charge.
Rosa, sorry if I may, just because there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to follow, but I'm following it at the moment. So if this room decided to go for the second option option B on topic 1, if in the event that someone was aggrieved that their sort of 4-year-old smelly wheelie bin is not as shiny as the new ones, and they're sort of saying to themselves, well, hang on a minute here, why am I having to pay the same compared to someone who's got a nice shiny one? Can that person take some comfort in knowing that should the wheelie bin break, for example, the wheels break, that you'll be replacing them free of charge? Is that correct, free of charge?
For something in that example, yes, because it's important that we provide the tools for the resident to present the waste and for our staff to collect them safely. So
the only difference then is that their bin may look aesthetically a little worn and might smell, but essentially they're still going to have a wheeled bin. It just won't be shiny. Okay, all right. I think that's an important point to note. Thank you.
Are you happy for me to continue? Yeah. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So topic 3 is about the actual payment process that the residents will experience. During the development of the proposed service, several options have been considered for payments. Option A has many different advantages. So this is about online card payments and making them annual payments. The advantages are that the online card payments are the council's standard method to collect smaller payments. The council already has an existing working interface which is used for several existing payments, including our bulky and electrical special collections, allotments and fishing licences. Online payments are instant, and on successful collection, the required order for stickers, bins and the setup on our back office system can flow automatically and without the 10-day direct debit regulatory delay, which I'll talk about in a moment. Online payments would allow the council to offer a live service within 10 working days of the resident subscribing to the service. And just to give you an example, Baber and Mid Suffolk Council suggests 4 weeks at the busiest times of the year. Option B1 and B2 look at direct debit payments. The research from other councils has confirmed that direct debit is not recommended for garden waste payment collections because using an annual direct debit model is overly complex, requires significant resourcing in the payment team and ICT support, and will generate extra resident calls at a time when we are looking at trying to reduce our capacity and resourcing. Implementing direct debit is a highly technical risk and will cost more than the other methods, both one-off costs and ongoing, and this will lead to a delay in the launch and impact on the revenue income to be achieved, which may lead to further difficult decisions going forward. In fact, councils we've contacted that launched with direct debit have moved away from that approach in whole or in part where possible, and they have strongly recommended us not to consider this. Almost every council offers single annual payments for garden waste, and this ensures no bad debt and prevents residents cancelling payments before completion of the subscription. Now, in terms of option B1, as I say, this is direct debit and offers annual payments. This option introduces a minimum dwell time of 10 days due to a regulatory direct debit notification. This is a significant delay to starting the service without risking bad debt for failed transactions. Additionally, there's a £20 charge every time a customer invokes the direct debit guarantee, which further risks the financial position of the proposal. This option requires additional staff, and the costs indicate £135,000 additional budget pressure to the proposal. And we would have to look at that cost being passed on to the residents. So those pricing models that we'd already looked at would need to increase if we were to recommend option B1. Option B2 is again direct debit, but is for monthly payments. So offering monthly payments, again, significantly increases the transaction costs. So for example, offering payments over 3 months would triple transaction charges. There's also an increased likelihood that residents would subscribe during a heavy period of garden collection and then cancel the direct debit, leaving us with a volume of small debts that would be very difficult for us to collect. And again, this option would require additional staffing and would increase the budget pressure to 161,000, which again, we would need to look at that cost being passed on to the residents signing up to the scheme. Next slide, please.
Rosa, I don't want to stop you because we've got our flow here, but I did promise people that we'd look at the clock at 7:30 for comfort breaks. I don't want to rush you. Roughly how much more of your presentation do you feel there is?
Probably 10 minutes.
Okay, members, do you want a comfort break now, or do you want a comfort break now? Yes, please. Okay, then let's do that at that moment. It's only fair. It is now 7:35. Please can we be back here at 7:47. That's a 12-minute break. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. It is 7:47. We've had our 12-minute comfort break. I hope you're all well and still happy to be here. I certainly am. If the technicals give me the nod that we're live, okay. Rosa, sorry to have interrupted your scintillating presentation. If you'd like to pick up from where you left off, please.
No problem. Just wait for the screen to show. Excellent. So, last topic, topic 4, is about what to do with the existing wheelie bins that are in our community. So, as we've already talked about, 18% of our residents already have wheeled bins. They may decide to not opt into the garden waste collection service, and therefore they'll have a spare wheelie bin. The report to Cabinet in June set out that as part of the proposed scheme, the council would include an option for residents who do not wish to subscribe to the service to notify us and arrange for a collection for free. Additional offer that the panel this evening may wish to recommend is a swap scheme, so enabling residents to pass brown wheeled bins that they do not want to other residents who'd like to take them for free. So it's proposed as a one-off. This is option B, for the wards with wheeled bins, so Mile End, Greenstead, Old Heath and Hythe, Beerchurch, Shrub End and Stanway. Residents are invited along to bring their unwanted bins to a central location in the ward one Saturday morning, and officers will attend, clean the bin off with a high pressure jet wash and enable other residents who'd prefer to pick up a reused bin for free in the afternoon. The cost of supporting this free second-hand swap service would be around £2,400, which currently hasn't been included within the budget costings. So next slide, please. Okay, so before handing back to you, Chair, and for discussions on these topics, I just want to remind the panel of the objectives to consider when making the recommendations. And in order to aid you in your decision making or recommendation making, the report and the following slides set out the options and the ability of each of those options to deliver against these objectives. Next slide, please. So the panel are asked to consider the time, deliverability, budget implications of the recommendations and the complexity of the different options, taking account of best practice elsewhere. So within this table, green indicates if an option can achieve the objective wholly, amber if it can only partly achieve the objective wholly, or red it doesn't achieve the objective at all. So in terms of the first two, this is the pricing model, both options can deliver across all of the objectives, albeit that option A, which is the option where there is a setup fee, the charge for the bin and the service cost, is slightly more complex in the pricing structure because it does include that separate cost for a wheeled bin. So that makes it more difficult to communicate to residents. Topic 2, the receipt of benefits discount. Clearly option A, no discount, meets all of the objectives and no authorities we've spoken to offer any form of discount. If a discount is recommended, the options B1 or B2 to consider will be dependent on which pricing model is recommended. But again, pricing model A will be more complex to communicate due to the slightly more complex pricing structure with the separate cost of the wheeled bin, and it might make this more difficult to communicate to residents. And in both cases, B1 and B2, the additional layer of applying discounts to certain residents will make our systems more complicated. Next slide, please. Topic 3, the payment process for residents. The online annual card payment meets all of the objectives, although the Amber score recognises that some residents may need support when we look at renewals in 2025. The two direct debit options show a clear opposition to the objectives across the board, and a recommendation of direct debit against best practice considered elsewhere will jeopardise the deliverability and the financial impacts of the scheme. And finally, what to do with wheeled bins in the community. Either option can be delivered and will meet the objectives, although through our research, most other authorities offer no similar service. And option B, the swap service, will have an additional £2,400 cost, which is not currently accounted for. So final slide, please. I appreciate you allowing me the time to kind of walk you through that report and the slides, but I do hope that that has aid and will aid your discussions this evening.
Thank you, Rosa. I found that comprehensive and very enjoyable. I'm going to give you an observation, a suggestion, a question, and then I'm going to open up to colleagues here. My observation is that I at home have a choice in the way in which I pay my home insurance. I can either pay it all in one go, and it's not insignificant, which is why I opt for the option of paying monthly. But in doing so, my APR is between 5 and 10%. And I don't think we're in a business here of charging residents that kind of APR for a monthly transaction approach. And I think really it's been useful from my mind that you've made it clear that you're unaware of other local authorities offering that monthly approach. Now, for a lot of people, clearly a one-off fee in the region of £100 is going to be very, very troublesome. I completely understand that. But equally, we're not trying to inconvenience people. You're making the point that there's going to be more administrative burden and cost if you do anything other than request a fee in one go. And you've made it clear to us tonight that no other local authorities offer anything different. I think that's a useful observation. My suggestion is around the existing wheelie bin users, and what a real bugbear of mine, and I loathe those brown envelopes, typically from HMRC, who write to you about pennies, but actually the letter itself has cost pounds. The administration around sending a letter and the physical stamp itself, price of stamps have well exceeded inflation of late. And so I really get annoyed by that, and I appreciate that not everyone is digital and not everyone will see the council's Twitter feed and other comms. So the suggestion I've got, and it only came to me tonight, as I was looking at my wrist, wishing that I had a watch on that I don't. I was looking at my wrist and I was thinking, when you go to a festival and you get a wristband and it has some useful information on it, and I just wondered actually if the crews would be in a position to attach effectively a wheelie bin wristband to existing wheelie bins really quite soon, to let people know about the changes that are likely to come, because clearly putting something through people's letterbox would take longer, clearly writing to people would be expensive, and you can't just rely on people seeing it on the internet, but actually attaching a quick sticky wristband to a wheelie bin handle might be a nice workaround. So there's my offering of a suggestion. And the question I've got was, and I think it was Councillor Scordis who said that he made the suggestion previously about potentially restricting the service for only 6 months of the year. I just wondered if you, Rosa, could give us a little bit of enlightenment around that idea and why that idea hasn't been considered to avoid these costs. Not that they would avoid them all, but I can see where he was coming from with that. So I'd be grateful to an insight into that last point, and then I'm going to stop talking and let everyone else talk.
Thank you. So in terms of wristbands, or wheelie bin wristbands, we have got quite a comprehensive communication plan that we're working through with our comms team. 18% of our residents have a wheel bin, so that communication method will only get to those on those wheel bins. However, through that communication plan, we are looking at a whole variety of different ways of making sure that the message gets to our residents. We understand how important it is to get a really clear message to all of our residents, because it's in our interest to make sure that everybody signs up. So there'll be a whole raft of different measures, from social media to print media, possibly leaflets, stickers, which we've used in the past, to those kind of tag options as well. So we've been working really closely with our comms team, looking at all that, using all of the learning that we've had from previous waste strategy changes, for example, and we're applying that learning to this. So that will all launch from October onwards. And the reason for that is that we need to make sure that we've got all of our details confirmed. And so the process this evening is going to help us confirm the way forward so that we can start putting all the detail into those communications going forward. In terms of restricting the service, what we have to bear in mind is that we have staff employed, full-time, contracted to the council. So any reduction of service would have an impact on the staffing requirement. We pause for 2 weeks over the Christmas period, but we don't, the men that work or the women that work for those 2 weeks don't go home. We redeploy them onto the higher priority route, so they're constantly working. To reduce the service any more than 2 weeks, so for 6 months, for example, we would effectively have to redeploy them, which would be a continued cost, or not employ them at all. That way we may have to look at things like casual contracts, and there are complexities around managing casual contracts. The fleet will still be in the yard. We'd have to look at other ways of utilising that if we are able to make sure we're getting the best out of it. So ultimately, a lot of the costs will still remain. The only cost that would reduce would probably be fuel, because the vehicles wouldn't be used as much. There's complexity around the staffing, and obviously the amount of garden waste that we'll be collecting will have an impact on the credit claim that we are currently receiving from Essex County Council. So for all of those reasons, and much more, the 6 months option has been discounted. Obviously, the other options that were considered when looking at this was stopping the garden waste collection in its entirety, and that would obviously provide the savings that Council's seeking. But if I can just elaborate a little bit more, and it is set out in the report, we did, officers, myself and the communications officer, attended a residents panel meeting face-to-face, and we did talk through the communications plan, but we ultimately talked to them about this proposal. And in the main, the residents fed back to us that they didn't understand why we were introducing it or why it was happening. And once we'd explained this financial situation, they completely understood and were really on board and just wanted to make sure that our communications were really clear and simple. So I just wanted to reinforce that point.
Councillor Goss, very briefly, if you may.
Yeah, I was just going to say the idea and option of just cutting the service in half doesn't cut the operational cost of 1.8 million in half. It just doesn't work like that. One of the bigger criticisms we've had in the past is the amount of casual labour that we use to keep the operation going. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, I think we have something like 20% casual staff to keep the operation going, to both holiday, training, sickness. Now that's a high number of people to manage, given that we employ over 100 people in that service to go and collect waste across the city, and it also comes at a much higher cost. So that's the other point. So if we did that, the cost would be probably still well over £1 million, I expect.
That's really useful. Thank you for that. I hope that satisfied Councillor Scorliss's curiosity. But I think we all do know actually how important it is to have operatives that know the patch, particularly in rural patches where there are houses down lanes that you don't know that it exists. So I think it's a salient point. Okay, I've done far too much talking this evening. I'm going to look around the room, and I see Councillor Paul Dundas first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you for the presentation, actually, and some interesting info in there. I do just want to delve a little bit into the business case and the financial side, because I think unless we fully understand those, it's difficult then to make financial decisions about different options presented. Now, the actual bins, Councillor Goss referred to, he was going to buy one. So are we selling the bins to residents, or are we leasing, lending, renting, whatever? In other words, is there any expectation we'll ever get them back, or do they belong to the resident? Because in your table 4.22, which is the business case, in the income, you clearly have the £30 in all that income, because if you divide your expected annual first year revenue by the number of customers, it comes to about £89. So you're clearly expecting, you're putting that £30 for the people who need a bin in your revenue. So where is the cost of the bin in your business plan? Is it a capital cost? In which case, what is the interest in the MRP? And if you're capitalising, then you can't sell the bin because the council still owns it, and there has to be an expectation you'll get it back in good condition, in good time, which from what you said for the options of where all the other ones are going to end up doesn't sound very realistic. So I think you'd be challenged if you capitalised a bin you're handing out to goodness knows where. So where's the cost of buying the bins? Because you can't have a business plan where you're selling something and you're getting it for free, unless we are saying we have enough bins, or there's going to be enough hanging around from the other options coming back, will cover all the bins we need. In which case, I think it's a little bit disingenuous to start charging residents 30 quid for a second-hand bin, which is 7 or 8 years old, which they effectively paid for in their council tax 7 or 8 years ago. So that's my first question about the bins. The other thing is about the accounting rules. 4.33, you refer to the accounting rules, where you say that under accounting rules, the revenue has to go in chiefly to next year, okay? But in the budget, in February, table D4, technical reconciliations, you have 600,000 income in this year. So the budget seems to be operating to a set of different accounting rules to your business plan. Now, in one organisation, you can't have two sets of accounting rules. So, you know, which is it? Which are we using? Because they can't both be right, in my opinion. So you've either got to take it out of the budget or you've got to alter your business plan, okay? Also, in the savings, you've got £230,000 of recycling kit new policy. What is that? Is any of that relevant to the stuff we're discussing tonight? Just to be clear, it may or may not be, because I don't know what it is. I wasn't here then. I do also have a bit of an issue with the £10 admin charge. I mean, I get the costs, okay, and I do understand. But in this day and age, people are used to being able to dip in and out of things without a £10 admin charge. You subscribe and unsubscribe to Netflix, to Disney, to goodness knows what else. My phone is 30 days, I can change it, you know. People are used to being able to go online and quickly change what they're subscribing to. And I do think you have to have a monthly option. It's 2023. People pay their council tax monthly, people pay their insurance monthly, people pay the aforementioned Netflix and Disney monthly, that they pay their phones monthly. As a customer offer and experience, that is what people expect. And I think introducing a new service where you've got a sort of £10 admin charge and have to sign up for a year, I think it's quite a dated customer experience. I think it's slightly from another age. Now, I get that other councils might do it, but I think we have to accept that it's not a great offering. I understand the direct debit issue, but you can actually, I pay goodness knows how many things monthly on a debit card. Phone, Netflix, I can mention that 3 times, other streaming services are available. I'm surprised it's not possible to do that. The other question I was going to ask is about the 1.8 million costs. And I accept what Councillor Goss said, that if you half the number of people you're collecting, you don't half the number of costs, half the cost. But what is the relationship? You know, if we've got a take up of 20%, are we still at 1.8 million? Is that a rigidly fixed cost, regardless of how many customers we have? Because that obviously dictates the business plan going forward as to how we look at actually the revenue implications in terms of profit or loss of the service. My other question is about that 1.8 million and perhaps a 20 or 27% or 35% uptake. Have we benchmarked that against commercial services? Have we looked at actually, if we actually just sub the whole lot out and then resold it, what that would cost? Because I think it's an important question to ask. I'm not saying we should do it, but I'm saying that for good governance, it's something we should have done and found out. I've probably got a couple more questions, but I think that's all of them for the time being.
I saw you diligently scribing away, Rosa. See what you can come back with. No, it's all good stuff. It's what we're here for.
Okay, so apologies if I miss anything, but I'll do my very best to cover this off, and I may come to my colleague John on some of these elements. So firstly, in terms of whether we have benchmarked against commercial services, i.e. have we looked at offering this out as an external service, obviously the service that the council is providing currently includes the garden waste service. We would, I think, if we were to look at that option, we'd need to look at the whole of the service rather than just part. And you may be aware that we are currently looking at our waste strategy, so the Environment Sustainability Panel. And I think as part of that process, once that strategy has been agreed, that would be a sensible point to consider what the operating model could be going forward, and whether that's through other authorities have delivered their waste service through traded companies, deliver it in-house, and we know other authorities within Essex are also have external contracts. So I think at that point it would be most favourable to look at the whole service rather than just part, just considering extracting that element of the service out of the current waste collection service will reduce our resilience. So I talked about earlier the different vehicles that we've got and the different staffing. Having that all integrated into one service means that we can redeploy staff and move things around when things are getting a bit tricky and a bit difficult, to make sure that we can deliver all of those services. If we were to extract that and the vehicles and the people, we reduce that resilience to deliver the service. So I think my recommendation to the panel would be to consider what the operating models are once the waste strategy has been agreed later this year. In terms of the £1.8 million cost, that's an estimate on the current service as it is integrated within the current waste service. And we've set out within the modelling and the costings of the project different phasing of the growth of that garden waste service dependent on the numbers of residents that do sign up. Obviously, at the moment, we're serving 100% pretty much of all of our residents, so we know what it would cost us to deliver that. We are hopeful that we will achieve those targets. It would be great if we could exceed that. But yeah, some of those costs will be variable, but a lot of the costs will be fixed because of the nature, as I said earlier, about the nature of the service that we're delivering. Going back to the £10 admin charge and the monthly costs, I've kind of gone through all of the detail for that. So rather than respond on that, I think it's a discussion for the panel on whether they would support that continuation of the £10 charge or not, option A, option B, and the different financial processes that are on offer. We've analyse what the cost implications of those different models are, and if we need to go into more technical details, I've got other appropriate officers here to talk through those. 230,000 new policy, what was that?
It's recycling kit new policy.
Oh, okay, so yes, apology. So again, as full council agreed a whole raft of different savings proposals and income generating opportunities. One of those was 230,000 towards a new policy around recycling kit. So looking at some form of charging mechanism, again similar to other local authorities, around recycling equipment.
Sorry, I don't understand any of that answer. Can you be more specific?
So looking at charging residents for the replacement of boxes, bags, bins, etc. The accounting rules and the budget, so the difference between the 600,000 that's currently in the budget and the 15,000 that we are presenting within the report. So section 151, Officer the Director of Finance has made it really clear to us that within accounting rules, we can only account for the funding income received for the year that the service is delivered. So whilst we'd set out a £600,000 income target for the current financial year, whilst we would achieve that in terms of an annual payment, so residents would pay in the first year or the first month of delivering the service, the resident is actually receiving their service over the current financial year and the next financial year. So therefore the income that we receive in the current financial year, so the first one-off £95, let's use as an example of option A, If we receive up to £600,000 of that income in this current year, we have to spread that income out over the 14 months that the resident is receiving the service. So that's down to accounting rules. Hence why we will have to account for 15,000 in the current year, but the rest of the income that's received in the current year is associated to the delivery of the service in the next financial year. So in effect, we will still receive all of the income, but it will come in the next financial year rather than the current. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're using accruals for the business plan and cash for the...
Correct. And then in terms of bins, selling them at the costs, etc., as this is a new scheme, new launch of a service, the bins purchased as part of the launch will be capital. The bins will remain the property of the council. Is there anything else I need to add on that?
And they will be...
Okay.
So the bins will have a life of 10 years and they will be depreciated over 10 years. I think the bins will be retained ownership-wise by the council. However, we simply cannot provide the bins to residents and then replace them when they break without making the charge up front for the cost of the bin.
And the insurance and MRP is set out within the budgets as well.
So the bins which are already out there, have they been written off? They're no longer on our books? Because we're rather casually saying you can swap them, do whatever, or do we still own them?
Obviously before my time, although I've been around here nearly 16 years, if I recall correctly, I believe some government funding was received for that from a Conservative government, I do believe, and therefore they've been paid for still via tax, but obviously a different route. They wouldn't have been paid for by the council through council tax or borrowing money. It was through a grant. But we can take that point away just about the amortisation, because they would now be 7 years old, quite smelly, maybe a bit dented. But we'll take that point away just to clarify it. But that's why those bins have been funded. And this is why, it's a really important point, this is why, in effect, you could be double charging for those bins because they've already been paid for. And you're getting residents to pay for a smelly old bin. That's the point I keep making about fair and equitable.
Thank you. I'll be brief because other people want to come in, but what my final comment on that is that if you're not selling the bin, you can't market it as pay £30 to buy a bin because you're lying. Because you're not buying a bin. You're having a bin delivered, which belongs to the council. You can't have it both ways. That's my only comment on that.
Yeah, but well, let's be frank, we know that this is around the costs of a service in all its different forms and then how to recover that. But it's a good technical conversation and we must be straight on it. We'll make sure we are.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, Leader. Okay, a number of other people wish to have a say. So, Councillor Arnold, please.
Looking at the proposals of the two different options, A and B, it's only one price, and I believe there's two size bins. So is this based on the larger bin or the smaller bin? Are you going to pay a bit more to have the larger bin, or was there a discount for having a smaller? Because if you buy something smaller, you tend to pay a little bit less. And if you do start with a small bin and realise that isn't appropriate for your use, can you upgrade later on? Thank you.
Really useful questions there, and I just wanted to intervene and say actually I think that having the option for the different sizes is really very good actually, because there are people that would struggle with a heavy bin, and I'm thinking about my 73-year-old mother. She'd be very grateful for having a choice. But if you'd like to respond to those specific points.
Yeah, good question. So in terms of the pricing is the pricing. What you've got to remember is that the majority of people will have a 240 litre bin. So from a procurement point of view, we will go out and bulk buy what we think the volume of bins will be so that we get the best discount for the taxpayer, and that also is how procurement rules work. It is very strict for councils. We will also go out and buy some 140 litre bins, and I think the minimum order we can get is 500. And therefore the discount that you would get on a smaller bin is going to be less than you would get if you bought 15,240 litre bins. So the cost differential between 140 litre and 240 litre is probably about £3. So and that will be depending on the price of plastic and oil and everything else going on in this world where you can't price anything for a long period. So we will at different points of the year have to go out and buy bins in bulk. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is storage. Shrub End is tight and we don't have tons of storage to have like thousands of wheelie bins sitting around. So we have to manage this really, really carefully. So that's the answer. Be the same price in effect, whether you have the bigger one, which is standard 240, or the smaller one, it will be the same price when you sign up. There's no discounts because then we'll be introducing more complexity for £3. And those prices will change. In order, and then the other question is, can we swap? Well, we've allowed that now. So where we've got wheelie bins on some estates where people have said, look, I've got a really tiny garden. Northfields in Mile End is a good example where they've actually got bin stores out the front. And some people have struggled to fit two 240 litre bins, have struggled to put a 240 litre bin in. The black sack ones are 180 litre. We've allowed them to swap. So operationally, it's not something I want to encourage because we'll have staff running all over Colchester swapping bins out, but the option exists now, and personally I don't have an issue if we have to deal with that. I think that's it's just another one of those flexibilities that Colchester will offer and no other authorities do.
Okay, we have a clarity of answer there. It's a flat fee for differential sizes. I see Councillor Smalls.
Thank you for that, Rosa. I've got a number of questions, so I'll go through them. The January launch, I've got concerns about because January is a very lean month for a lot of people. Typically, people get paid their wages before Christmas Day, so it makes it like a 6-week month. Well, not a month, but you can wait up to 6 weeks before you're paid again. And obviously then people have had the expense of Christmas. And I understand, this has got to be done, so I'm not questioning that, but I am questioning the January launch. From your presentation, it seemed like that was baked in, but I have got concerns, particularly because it's 53,000 to be spent on communications. I think we want that targeted at the time people are likely to take it up. And also in January, there's less garden waste. Following from that, if somebody doesn't sign up in January, and it comes to March, whatever, they've got a bit more money, there's more garden waste, then they're thinking, I will sign up. Are they going to have to pay for the whole year? And I guess that this is why it's very difficult to pick through these options, because when I've looked at the first document, there's sort of a lot of questions I've got to start with. So January launch, is that 100%? Because there are concerns about that I've got. Following on from that, if somebody then decided in March, any time, I want to do it now, would they then have to be paying for the whole year? Because that could be a disincentive. Back to the terraced houses and things like that. I'm in favour of the small bins, but I still think there's some places where it just, I know I've lived in a property, not now, but where it just wouldn't be possible. Some of the terraced houses, the passages around the back, historically, they have been blocked off. So I've lived in a house where to get from the back to the front, you had to go all the way through the house. So in point 4.17, it says like a smaller bin has been tested in a property in Newtown. I'm assuming you've actually, if I take this literally, it's just been tested in one property, which wouldn't be enough. Because, clearly there are houses that can't accommodate a wheelie bin, and there isn't room at the front. In Rowhedge on Regent Street, which is in my ward, cars park on the pavement. And even when I've spoken to the police, when we did stroll with the patrol, that's something they just sort of accept. These are properties that were built before the car in order for there to be space for, well, refuse truck, for example, to go up, or fire engine, it's not ideal, but the cars do park on the pavement. There aren't front gardens, or they're very minimal. If you then put a wheelie bin in the mix, that's going to be difficult.
Can I just intervene, Councillor Smalls? Actually, I think another point there on Regent Street is you're on a very steep hill as well.
Yes, yes. But so there are, and I'll just say now, I am totally in favour of wheelie bins. I'm not suggesting we don't have wheelie bins, because they are better for the health and safety of the workers. That's a massive priority for me, and I think they're better for the health and safety of the customers. So I'm not, but within that, I do think we have to acknowledge there are some properties that can't have a wheelie bin. Now, looking at this document, the white bags are going to be, that's not going to be an option. And again, I'm all for reducing the white bags. They blow around, we will lose them. They're bad for the environment. So I'm in favour of the principle of the wheelie bins. But I do believe, however hard we try, there's going to be some properties that just can't have a wheelie bin. So it might be that they can't have the service, in which case we need to be clear and honest about that. It's been, this is from another councillor actually, who's Councillor Rippingdale's asked me to just mention sheltered Colchester Borough Homes properties, if we've got arrangements for them. Now, I'm not sort of all over that, but that is something that they want to know. Colchester Borough Homes, the sheltered accommodation, what are the arrangements? Sorry. Now, the ultimate goal, this is the last thing, the ultimate goal. So on the one hand, when I'm reading this document, we very much want people to sign up because we're going to get an income from that. But also, we want to encourage people to recycle and compost, so possibly not sign up. So I don't know which way we're going with it. Are we ultimately want to get rid of the service so people are self-sufficient? Or is the goal to get as many people to sign up as possible? So yeah, I think that's it.
I shall answer the lot. Right, so the first point, I've made notes, so we'll take them in order. So the first point, why are we starting it in January? Well, there's a good reason for that. Number one is the way we've split the income through the business case. And number two, it allows the service to in effect do a soft launch as it builds up to the peak April onwards, because the peak growing season is April to November. And then the winter period, it does die down, but then you've got areas like Eastwood Drive, you've got places in Lexton, you've got other areas with huge gardens where they just have bins and bins and bags of leaves. But the volume will go down. But the reason for doing it in January is so it's absolutely tested, tried and properly nailed for when the peak season kicks in April. So if we'd started it in April or May, when we're all slugging it out over elections and we introduce this, not only will we end up with disingenuous stuff going through doors, although we've got that now in a certain ward, that will confuse the residents and probably actually would be a risk on the risk register that politics would get in the way of launching it. That's another good reason not to start it in April. In terms of marketing it, well, we've already said we're going to write to people in October, and in fact we will be doing marketing around promotions. So if you sign up now, in effect you'll get 14 months for the price of, or 15 months for the price of 12. To April period for free in effect, or as part of your promotion. If you sign up, so you could sign up, so your point was, I don't have any money in January, but you could sign up in October, and then it starts in January, and you haven't got that post-Christmas blues where everyone's bank account is empty and no one's going out. So that's one of the reasons for marketing it early, to get people ready to sign up, and that's personal choice. But that covers off your point. In terms of if you then sign up in March, well, no, you would get the year's service. So we're not going to sign. You wouldn't pay in March and get a month and then pay again. That would be again, that wouldn't happen.
Can I Sorry. So if you paid in March, would you get a year till the next March, or would you be losing January, February? And if you just, is that clear? So if you pay in March, would you still get a year?
So if I can just come in there to clarify, if you sign up before or on launch in January, your service will expire in March 2025, the end of March 2025. If you can sign up any time. However, when you sign up will determine how long that first subscription lasts. So if you sign up, obviously, on the 1st of March, you'll get 2 months less than you would if you signed up for the launch, and so on. I think it clarifies it. So the sooner you sign up, the more service you get for your first fee.
Are we saying if you sign up for January, be it early or in January, you're getting 3 months free?
Yes, essentially. Or 3 months service free.
Okay, Councillor Goss, were you still going?
Oh,
I think
yes.
you were.
Yeah, indeed. Facts galore coming. In terms of terrace houses, I mentioned it earlier in my opening conversation. 65% of councils charge for garden waste. 83% of councils have wheelie bins. Okay. And when I say they have wheelie bins for everything. They haven't got the hybrid that we've got, where we've got 12,751 properties with wheelie bins. Ipswich is a good example. It's quite similar to Colchester. It has a lot of industrial areas where you've got terraced housing. They all have wheelie bins and they make the service work. Councils don't generally have hybrid systems. Where you've got a hill, where you've got Victorian terraced housing, they have wheelie bins. Other councils make it work, and although it may not be perfect, it may be that the bin has to sit outside the house or in the front garden, or be wheeled through the house in some cases. That's why purposely we've gone for a smaller wheeled bin, so if people have no access, they can wheel it through the house. It's not ideal. But it is up to the individual to take some responsibility to make it work. It's not for the council to try and fix every single situation because of historic housing, because other councils just rolled out wheelie bins and have just got on with it. And we can't take into account every single nuance of Mrs. Miggins' terraced house. She has to walk further or whatever. We just, we have to, we've been so flexible with this and taken learnings from other councils. The other point I would make, if they've got no access, how do they get their Hessian sacks through? They would walk them through the house. Same principle, isn't it? It's a different container, and actually would be easier because you're doing it once. You're not walking it through 4 times and dropping your sticks and leaves everywhere. So I think, we do have to put some personal responsibility back on people. I talked about us all being adult about this as councillors. So we absolutely have listened, and it's not going to be perfect. I've had a couple of people raise this with me, but that's why we've got smaller bins. Hessian sacks are dreadful, right? They cost the council a lot of money because they blow away. They're not, also, we talk about a climate emergency, they're not biodegradable. They are nasty. They're hard to deal with. So they're not good for the environment. They're also not good for our staff. That's the other point. The staff is an important factor in this. And the staff have been saying, we want wheelie bins. I've had them stop me when I've been lit a pit going, when are you giving us wheelie bins? They want this for their own health and safety, and that's really important. Sheltered accommodation, absolutely. Rosa and Karen, head of housing CBH, are in touch about that, about some of the nuances and some of the sheltered schemes. So we're obviously there. I'll leave them to deal with the operational detail, although I'm sure I can dive into it and enjoy it. And the ultimate goal about recycling, are we trying to stop people signing up and not recycling? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
To be clear, I didn't say stop them recycling. I was saying, are you trying to encourage them to recycle at home, compost? I probably didn't say it clearly, obviously I didn't, but I meant, do we want people to sign up for this scheme, Or do we want them to be independent, composting at home, you know, taking it to the site themselves?
Well,
What's
again,
the goal?
I talk about personal responsibility, right? It's up to individuals. We're giving people choice. You can carry on paying for a service that you get now and carry on using wheelie bins, you know, once a fortnight, or what will become wheelie bins for some. That's a personal choice. You can decide not to do anything and not opt into the service. Or you can choose to go to the recycling centre in Shrubend, which some people will do, particularly if they live on that side of the city. So we're giving them choice still. So some of that will be recycled there. Or people can self-compost as they do now, and we've given the opportunity to get you know, a half-price composter as part of this. But that's down to personal responsibility and choice. So in effect, I've just rattled off 3 ways that you can recycle your waste. Do I think loads of it will end up in black sacks, etc.? No, because our staff are really diligent and they'll spot it and they'll sticker stuff or they'll check, and they won't take it. And then, of course, the other thing with the waste strategy that we've talked about, one of the things we can do as an authority is we can fine people for not recycling. So we talked about trying to push our recycling rates up. I've been out on the front line, as you know, and done garden waste and black sack. And, you know, we did a round in Shrubend, and the amount of black sacks that had clinking in them and were really heavy because people are not recycling glass and cans, are just chucking it in the black waste. That has got to change. And, you know, it would be the same for garden waste. If you choose not to recycle it, the law allows for you to fine individual. Long term, it's education, but the law does allow people to be fined for not recycling. It's behaviour change. Final point, 42% of our waste was recycled before we changed behaviour by stopping people from putting everything in black sacks. Unlimited black sacks, put 8 out every week, goes in landfill, great. The recycling increase was 14%, one of the best in the country. So it does show that you can elicit behaviour change by just making people think.
Okay, I see Councillor McLean and then I see Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. What I'm really wondering is why this is here on at this panel today. What I thought scrutiny was for reviewing and scrutinising executive decisions, but what we have here is not quite a decision made by Cabinet, but passing the decision making to the committee or to the panel. We're a Cabinet system. I think we should have a more formed decision from the Cabinet before it comes to the panel. That's just first observation. I have a question. So several years ago, before I had any interest in local politics, when I was probably in my teens, wheelie bins were partially rolled out in Colchester. Why wasn't it fully rolled out? And then another question I have is a scenario which probably wasn't an issue people cared about, but a resident raised this with me the other day. Concern, they don't have to, you know, they've never thought they'd have to pay for garden waste. They have a completely patioed garden. What few weeds grow that they weed, they throw into a very small bug hotel and get rid of it like that. But they have a sycamore tree right next to them at the boundary on their neighbour's territory, and it drops a heck of a lot of leaves in autumn, and it completely covers, and they have to sweep it up. They put it in a bag, and they're used to doing that. They do it for free, but now they have to pay for it. But it's not coming from their garden; it's coming from their neighbour's garden. So if it comes from their neighbour's garden, should they pay for it? Should it be thrown over the fence back to their neighbour? I want some clarity And I think residents may ask that question, or I've been asked that question, and I'd like to feed back to them. Perhaps if I can know that. And also when it comes, terrace housing was raised a lot. I've got a lot of that in Newtown, got a lot of it in Christchurch. But what we also have are very steep gardens in areas. I'm thinking Malden Road, my ward. There are gardens where you have very steep steps up to the housing and quite steep driveways, and I think what's the safety of getting a wheelie bin down there. So I don't think wheelie bins can be rolled out absolutely everywhere, but I think we need to be really, 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 really careful that we're making sure they're not rolled out in areas where it really just isn't possible, and or for accessible reasons. Yeah, and you mentioned walking through houses. With the bags, I don't think walking through the houses with a wheelie bin is easier than with the bags, but I am actually in favour of wheelie bins though. But I think these questions need to be answered, and they need to be very clear, and I need to know what I tell to my residents, because there's a lot of questions about this, and I ask a lot of people what they think of it. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCain. I think Councillor Ross did pick up on the why we are where we are with the hybrid system earlier, and actually to add some value to that, I think at the time, if I recall, being a very fresh councillor around 2015, was actually every ward was asked what their residents wanted, and as Councillor Goss says, people were given a degree of latitude over this and to make discretion, and perhaps that wasn't the right thing to do, but that's what happened. There was an interesting technical point there about someone else's tree branches and leaves. Rosa, we haven't heard from you. Do you want us to kick us off?
I mean, I can answer all those, so I'm happy to take them because I've been asked the question. So, the first point, slightly political, was why is it here? Well, I think we've outlined that. I think Darius outlined that earlier. The original decision was just to go with option A, where that is it. But we've obviously listened to feedback from residents and councillors, and that's why you've then got a very diverse paper that lists out numerous options. Some of them probably more palatable than others, but they're there. And in effect, you're scrutinising those, and then you are going to recommend back to the portfolio holder, me, which of those options you think is correct. So you are scrutinising it. That is what this panel is here to do. You're not a decision-making panel, you're absolutely right, but that's the same for any paper that comes through this panel. It's not a decision-making panel, it's a recommendation, and recommendations from scrutiny come back to Cabinet or to the portfolio holder. This is delegated to me. So the decision is made by me and me only. So, I've no doubt there'll be some leaflets going out with this is a Martin Goss tax on or something ludicrous. But anyway, that's how I'll write them myself and post them through my own door. Oh, sorry, somebody's already put it on social media, and they got an equally silly response. So wheelie bins partially rolled out. I've covered it. I covered it earlier, and I think Darius has recovered it, so I'm not going to go over that again. Right. So trees comes back to personal responsibility. I've had people saying to me, "Are you going to send the council round to remove all the leaves that come from Shrub End Playing Field or from Highwoods Country Park or wherever, because they're council trees?" I have to give a sensible response to that. It's personal responsibility. You've heard me say this a lot tonight, that people do need to take some personal responsibility. Now, the law is quite clear that you can cut back vegetation to your neighbour's fence and hand it back to them. And I would suggest leaves probably falls into the same category.
Sorry, could I just add to that? I believe it's not just to the fence, it's actually to where the branch comes out from the tree. as to not kill the tree by cutting off just half a branch.
And also a technical point, if it's got a tree preservation order on it, you have to get a professional to do it and do a tree report at their cost. The council won't pay for that either. So it doesn't matter who owns the tree, whether it's the council or the neighbour, but the responsibility for clearing your own land is down to you. You own that land or rent that property. It's personal responsibility. So charging for garden waste doesn't change that personal responsibility, because 65% of councils charge for it. So, you know, do we suddenly say, well, if you live in Ipswich, it's a different personal responsibility than in Colchester because we're not currently charging for it? No, absolutely not. So I've heard this a few times. It's personal responsibility to deal with what falls in your garden. And I think the law is extremely clear on that. Terraced housing and steep gardens and steps, I've covered this. 83% of councils have wheelie bins and they don't have hybrid systems like we do because it's expensive. You have different vehicles, and you know, it's not perfect when you have a one size fits all, but we have to make it work with wheelie bins. Other councils do it. What makes Colchester any different? Housing in Ipswich is no different to housing in Colchester. They have historic places like Newtown. They had huge industrial areas in Ipswich, and they've got similar style of housing, and they have 3 wheelie bins to deal with, not 1. They have a recycling wheelie bin, a black waste wheelie bin, and a garden waste wheelie bin. They have 3, and terraced houses have them. Seen it in Ipswich. I worked in Ipswich on and off for nearly 10 years, so I do know Ipswich quite well. I'm just using it as one comparator. Chelmsford has terraced housing. They have wheelie bins. You know, we can go on. So I sympathise for those individual places, but we have to ensure that we have a universal approach to this, also from a cost perspective. We're not going to use Hessian sacks because of staff, and we are purchasing a couple of new vehicles with bin lifts on for a reason, because we are using wheelie bins, and we can't go around sticking Hessian sacks or boxes or whatever else might get proposed for those areas. It has to be wheelie bins, and we've tried to be flexible by making the wheelie bins smaller, and that again is something that we've done that other councils haven't done. There's only so far we can go, sorry, but you know, it's personal responsibility. Walking through houses, well, I'm sure walking through with 4 Hessian sacks, but then wheeling 1 enclosed wheelie bin, it's 1 trip, not 4, and probably stuff won't fall out of it. Again, it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but you know, you're dealing with it now. You're just changing that mechanism more, and actually wheeling something is probably easier than carrying a bunch of heavy sacks, actually. And there will be an FAQ on the website covering all this kind of stuff off. That's already written and prepared. So again, those sorts of scenarios will be covered.
Councillor McLean.
Yeah, could you let me know what the dimensions are of the smallest wheelie bin? Because residents of Newtown particularly will probably want the smallest.
Yeah, that will be in the FAQ. That will be one thing I don't know. I'll revise it for you so you can ask me next time you see me. We'll make sure that's put around, but it will be in the FAQs of what the sizes of wheelie bins are.
Okay. Do you have any idea? Could you maybe do this and show me?
Be reasonable.
Okay, Councillor Willett, I know you have a number of areas to look at.
Only necessary, Chairman. My first comment is on the business case, which I feel underpins the whole of today's exercise, because if the business case isn't absolutely right, absolutely understood and transparent to the panel, then many of the other decisions don't necessarily fall into place. So my first question on the business case is, we've heard various predictions of take-up, and given the precarious state of the council's finances, and this is a fairly large sum which is going towards fixing some of those difficulties, I think it's essential we get the best possible understanding of how much this scheme is going to bring in. Now, it's easy to put a finger in the air and say we think it will be 28% in year 2 and we think it will be 50% in year 3. But are these really accurate enough for setting critical budgets at a time when all budgets are under pressure? I certainly believe that we should have had a proper marketing exercise. And rather than just looking sideways to see what some other councils have done, and it seems to vary quite widely, we should have been asking our residents, because they are the people we represent. We don't represent Peterborough or Ipswich or Cambridge, we represent Colchester. And we should have been respecting the people of Colchester by asking them whether they will take up this service. There should have been a proper marketing exercise going out to a statistically valid proportion of the electorate or those who are likely to use the service, asking them, will you take it up if it costs, say, 25, 55, 95 pounds, so that we've got some real data related to the people of Colchester and what they are prepared to pay. And I feel without that proper marketing input into this exercise, the business case is flaky, certainly so flaky that I would find it difficult to use it as a realistic management tool in deciding where we should go. Sticking with the business case, I'm having great difficulty understanding the efficient use of resources for this service. We are told in one place that the cost of delivering the service at the moment is £1.8 million. We then heard that if we don't deliver the 100% service, if we didn't deliver over winter, for instance, or if we delivered to 50% or 28%, that the fixed costs of the basic service, the £1.8 million, would hardly change. And I find that quite astounding. I mean, in the real world of business, such a gearing would never be permitted to occur. And I mean, the reasonable assumption is that if your fixed costs before the extras of introducing the service are 1.8 million, and you're only going to provide it for 100%, and we're only going to provide it to 28% of those customers in the first year, surely there must be a massive reduction possible in that 1.8 million. And the idea that we staff up for 100%, if we're only running for 28%, or if we don't have a collection over winter, we're just going to leave all those vehicles unused in Shrub End Yard. We're going to leave the staff who would otherwise use them sitting around, perhaps doing low priority jobs, or even high priority jobs if there's snow to be cleared. It just does not seem right to me, Chairman, that we assume that all the resources for 100% are going to continue to be on our budget when they are not being used. I just don't get it, don't follow it, not prepared to support a business case which is based on that position. Then, when we look further at the figures we're given in paragraph 422, these are the deltas. It's delta accounting, what changes, not what are the absolute costs. And the first question I always ask is just what is the profitability of this scheme? Now, we're told in 2.1 what the income targets are going to be, and that's flaky because it's not supported by marketing data, it's supported by guesses and sideward looks. But we are told 1.658 million would be reaped in the third year. If that is so, surely we would be doing a profitability exercise to say that, say, in the third year, we've got income of 1,658,000, but we're surely not going to say the whole of the 1.8 million is chargeable to that, because that represents the 100%. We'd only be charging, we must find some way of reducing that 1.6 million, 100% collection capability, down to 50% collection capability, particularly if the long-term marketing is that we are only going to collect from 50% of the people forever. So one would have expected to have seen a charge of sort of 900,000 for delivering the service, and therefore the overall profitability would have been in the region of 800,000. And one can do exactly the same with year 2, where the income from charging would be 1,321,000, but the cost, 28% of the 1.8 million, would only be about 540,000, which actually comes in at about the same level of profitability of just on the 800,000. Now, asked earlier on, why don't the Conservatives make suggestions from time to time, budget amendments? And the answer is, whenever we make an amendment, Chairman, it's just ignored, it's batted back to us, which is why we've stopped doing it. And so I am asking that it is unreasonable, or do you not agree that it's unreasonable to carry the cost of providing service for 100%, costing 1.8 million, when we are only providing 28% or 50% according to the year? I just don't get it. It's an amazingly strange way of using the council resources. It suggests to me, Chairman, that we are ultra set in our ways, and we are not prepared to look creatively at ways of improving the profitability. It's easy to charge for the service, but at the same time, we should be reducing the costs so that we get a double bonus to help support the essential services. Moving on to other issues that I have difficulty with. Are the unintended consequences. When the first version of garden waste charging came out, the pre-budget version, it was scrutinised by this panel, and the panel identified that one of the unintended consequences would be bonfires, fly tipping, and to a certain extent smuggling stuff into black bags. Councillor Corey took these on board and went away and looked at them, and he actually cancelled much of the reductions in the budget for enforcement officers and neighbourhood services officers, because he agreed that there would be a significant increase in the need to deal with bonfires and enforcement officers, neighbourhood services officers to pick up fly tipping and so on. And there was a change to the budget to ensure that not so many staff were being taken out for that purpose. Is it not fair then, Chairman, that if there are unintended consequences, like having to clamp down on bonfires, clamp down on fly tipping, and also deal with black bags which are not being collected but left around on the pavement, that those costs should also be reflected in the business case? And to charge them elsewhere when we know that they are a direct consequence of introducing this new measure, again, seems to be cheating on the accounting system. The next point I have is that the business case presented to us assumes that the cost, the service cost, the 55 or the 56 pounds 76, if we make adjustments for those on low incomes, will remain static. Yet we know that there is an annual review of charges every year. So I want to ask, what is the anticipated increase in the charge for years 2 and 3? Or are we being given a cast iron assurance that there will be no increase on the 55 or 56 pounds 76 charge for this service over the 3-year life of the initial scheme? The final question, I think, at this stage, we heard mention earlier on about a change of policy on recycling kit. We've also had fluctuations. Who's going to own the wheelie bins? It started off as the customer buying them, then moved to the customer leasing bins, which will remain our property for a period of 10 years. There seems to be a degree of imprecision about this, which is not recorded in the business case. And we need to know what happens if a wheelie bin, gone wheelie bin is stolen, or it's lost, or it's dropped from the lift mechanism on the back of the recycling freighter, and it needs replacing for some reason. Under the scheme that we just had lifting the carpet earlier on, that people will be asked, residents will be asked to pay for their own recycling kit in future. We do need clarity in the business case about what is going to happen when wheelie bins need changing. Are they going to be, is it going to be a chargeable item if you have it replaced, or will it be a council item which will just be replaced at the council cost? And I think that I don't understand how this item is being dealt with in the business case or the future budget, if there are policy changes in the pipeline. Just remember, we're talking about a business case which extends forward for 3 years, so we need to take into account in this business case any policy changes, such as those for purchasing recycling kit, which will take place during the lifetime of the first 3 years that we're looking at. If I can stop at that point, Chairman.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Dundas, but I think on the wheelie bin point, it is owned by the council, leased to the resident. It has an anticipated 10-year lifespan, and if it breaks down because it breaks down, it's replaced. I heard that earlier, but let's bring in Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, I think some of my comments are related to what Councillor Willett said, actually, so I'll add them on now. I think on the capital cost for the bins, on the business plan, what is that capital cost? So how much money are we borrowing to buy the bins, and how many bins do we expect to buy? Because that's not quite clear how many extra new bins we're buying, because obviously we're assuming that a number of people will already have bins or will find a bin. But can people buy their own bins? Perhaps the other question. No, they can't, but they can find one off a neighbour. Okay, and actually, I think Councillor Witts made a good point. I mean, if we're talking about the cost for collecting 100% of properties at the moment, is 1.8 million. Now, I take completely the point that costs are not directly related to the percentage you collect because you have fixed costs. But if you reduce your collection from 100% of properties to 25 or 50%, I can't believe that doesn't have some effect. Even if it's £1, even if it's 20p, I find it incredible that it would have absolutely zero effect on our fixed cost or on our cost providing the service. So what modelling has been done against different scenarios of take up, and what figures have you got for what our actual costs? So if we take the, I can't remember what we're looking at, 27% in the first couple of years, what do we think effect that will have on the 1.8 million? What figure will we have? And also, we've got in here some comparisons with other councils, but it doesn't actually, with respect to anything useful whatsoever, because it just tells them what they're charging. What I want to know is what their take-up percentage is, what their revenue is, and whether they're making a profit or loss on it. Because Thurrock, who, let's face it, need every pound they can get, have stopped their service. So I can assume that even with the charging, they were still making a loss on it, because otherwise they'd have carried on, because they frankly need the money. And my final question, if I may as well ask it now, is to pick up on a question Councillor Smalls asked about the sign up. Now, I get if you sign up in March 24 instead of January 24, you'll get 12 months. What if you sign up in March 25? Do you get 1 month or do you get 12? You know, are there times of the year you can sign up and only get 3, 2, 6 months? That's what I'd ask you now.
Okay, so an awful lot for us to go through there, but I'm really pleased to say that we've got answers to all of that because we have done an awful lot of work around all of those areas. So I'm going to hand over to my business improvement manager, John Kellett, who's going to guide you through some of those answers, and I'll chip in as I need to.
Thank you, Rosa. So I think I'm going to start off with the 50% assumption by year 3. That has come from lots of conversations with other councils. A 50% assumption will get you 60% of the credit claim because the people that value the service and subscribe to it are much heavier users than the ones that have a universal service. That's the experience of Peterborough City Council. We talked a lot about costs and fixed costs and variable costs. We'll be starting the new service with 3 vehicles and 3 crews. We currently run 5 vehicles and 5 crews. The crews that we don't need on the garden service will be used to displace agency and reduce our overall cost burden, which is quite considerable because our establishment does not cover the full FTE costs or full-time equivalent costs of running the service. We cannot partially crew out a vehicle if someone is ill, if someone's on holiday. We then have to bring in agency to cover those routes, otherwise we cannot collect, and residents get incomplete routes, which you, I think, have experience of, but more lately, a lot less experience of because we very rarely don't complete a route now. Our assumptions are that we will add a vehicle when the number of sign-ups justifies adding the vehicle. We built it in our capital case. We anticipate sometime in 2024 we will need that extra vehicle. If it's before the new one is supplied, we will spot hire a vehicle. That will cost £6,000 a month, and that will ensure that we can offer capacity for the residents that sign up. In terms of business case, we are going to be reviewing the cost of the ongoing service and any other costs on an annual basis, but that annual basis will start from the 2025-26 financial year, so that the service cost will be fixed for the 3 months of the first season and the 12 months of the second season. That will not change. One of the unknowns is the price of wheelie bins. We currently buy by the ESBO framework, which is a local government framework for buying recycling materials. The pricing does vary quite considerably because of the market price of plastic and the cost of energy. So the cost of the wheelie bins does vary. As a fallback, we have the framework and we're in the middle of a tender. If you go on the tender portal, you'll see we've issued a tender for wheelie bins. So we will achieve the best value that we can. As Councillor Goss mentioned, we're buying a large amount of standard bins because most people will take the standard bin, and we expect to get more keen price on the standard bins because we'll be buying whole lorry loads at a time. The tender we have is expectant of a delivery within 1 week of order with very tight timelines around that, but we'll see what we get back on the tender response, which will tell us whether the pricing is more attractive than the local government framework, but we will buy through the most effective mechanism. Recycling equipment, where a bin is damaged, we've taken the lead from terms and conditions on every other local authority, and we've taken what we think is the best approach. It's a very grey area on every council service. From our perspective, it's very difficult to tell whether a resident's damaged a bin or we've damaged a bin. If a customer damages their bin, reports a damaged bin, we will replace it, and it will be replaced free of charge, but only if we recover the bin that they have already. Okay, so we won't be handing out a bin unless we get one back. If a customer loses a bin, they will have to fund a replacement bin. We think that's fair, and that is a policy that is in alignment with many other councils. In fact, I think it's more generous than most other councils. Tendering offer a 12-month warranty. If it's damaged after that, you pay for a new one, is an example. But I think pretty much every council write something which is very grey. We're trying to make it fairly clear and black and white in the terms and conditions, because we think it's fairer. Yeah, capital cost bins, how many will we buy? Well, that depends entirely on how many people sign up. Our assumptions are that by year 3 we'll be at 50%. Basildon have achieved 65% in 2 months of launching their service. Obviously, that gives all sorts of logistical challenges, and they have a lot of logistical challenges around their service. But we are building certain contingency into the way we're going to run the service to allow us to scale up if we need to. Our assumptions are much more conservative in terms of the percentages we're aiming for. In the first season of 3 months, we're aiming to get to 11%, and in season 2, we're aiming to get to about 30%. And get to 50% in season 3. If we do better than that, that's a really good thing for the council because we'll bring more income in. But our assumptions are on those numbers in the business case.
I think you've covered everything. And just to talk about the capital, it's not within this report because it was included in the cabinet report and was agreed by cabinet in terms of the spend, etc.
Yeah, but you must have had a figure to generate the MRP and the interest in table 4.22. So what figure have you used?
Yes, and so that table has been lifted from that cabinet report. So it was reported.
So you can't tell us what your capital budget is?
I can do. I'll just have to bring up the cabinet report.
Okay.
No, I'm just perplexed, Chairman. We have before us a report, and which states the current cost of running the service at 1.8 million. Coming back to this, because this is one of the fundamental points. We've now heard that that is not the realistic figure. That other modelling has gone on. There is a lower expectation for running this service in terms of the costs, and lower staff expectation compared with what we have at the moment. That has not been included in the report. Some of the financial details have not been included in the report. Now, I think it was Dominic Raab was severely censured for saying a report was inadequate, so I will not do so. But to me, I really don't want to continue with this scrutiny until the issues that we brought up have been reset in this business case. It appears there is a substantial amount of information about how this scheme would work, which has not been presented to members, but which is clearly known to our officers. And things such as the level of resource needed to run it is fundamental to the whole issue of whether the resources are being used well. And to present a report which doesn't explain these issues, but then it becomes evident that these issues are known and are being withheld from the panel, I just despair, Chairman.
Colleagues, it is 9:10. I'm conscious that there is some information that Councillor Willits feels that he would like to understand better. Does anyone want a comfort break for 5 or 10 minutes, and we can see if any further information can be obtained to get closer to satisfying Councillor Willits? Would you like a comfort break? Comfort break? 5-minute comfort break. Okay, that was the final comfort break of the evening. We will try and proceed with what the options are before us tonight. Anyone else wish to contribute at this point? Shall we get into looking at some of the options and see if anyone here wishes to nail their colours to the mast with anything they like or they dislike? I'm just in no random order going to start over here, Councillor Arnold. There are options in front of us. Even if we express a view so that the leader here and the portfolio holder here can get a flavour of what the views are, even if it's not definitive and sent as one collective of this panel, I think it'd be worth hearing the views, so go for it.
Okay, I'm looking at the two, option A and B for the initial setup. My personal view is option B is a fairer system because everyone will be paying the same regardless if they got a bin or not, and there is a way of them to change or upgrade their bins if they desire. Looking for our options for residents on local community tax, can't remember what this is for, to help our residents on council tax rebate. I think as a progressive council, we should be supporting our residents that really need the support, and I think we should definitely be offering a self-help funding to those residents that need a little bit extra help so they can carry on enjoying their gardens. So that's where I'm leaning towards. I'm thinking out more of option B1. No, option B2, because that's the one, and it's only going to add, I think, £3 to the overall charge for everybody. So, and that will really help our residents to carry on enjoying what they enjoy already without losing it. Thank you.
Councillor Smalls.
Right, let me think about. When I first saw this document, I was uncomfortable with how it's set up, choosing between A, B, A, B1, B2, B3, like a multiple choice. And I am a new councillor, but it didn't feel to me that it is the role of the scrutiny panel to be sort of saying which options we go for, but to scrutinise, the practicalities of the schemes. So I'm not going to sort of say which options. Okay.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I've expressed my concerns, but I believe it is the role of a cabinet in a cabinet system to make the decision and not be disguise a decision as a recommendation. Thank you.
I'm just going to say that as chair of this panel, I don't really want this discussion to continue much further after this meeting, because we have been given adequate time. So if we want to make our case now for or against any particular aspects, this is the time to do it, because these guys need to market it. So I'm just going to put that down as a note. Councillor Dundas.
Thank you. Always be careful when you offer to substitute. I think that's the moral of this one. I'm just going to comment a little bit. I don't want to labour the point because we have moved on. I understand Councillor Willett's points on the business plan, and actually what I said when this came before scrutiny in 2020, sort of seemed like a generation ago, I was perhaps a little bit unkind. I shouldn't really have said it. What I said was that if you took this as a business plan over the road to the bank, they'd laugh at you and show you the door. But I do understand that this is about the revenue implications. But like Councillor Willits, I do like to see a business plan. I like to see cost bases and how they relate to your number of customers. That's what I kind of really want to see, and it's not in there. So when we're being critical of it, I think that's the root cause, that it's not a conventional business plan in any sort of conventional sense. And I think you would have to concede that. I do take the point also, I feel we're rather boxed in and restricted on this sort of grid as to what we can choose. We've got these options, and if you don't like any of them, what do we do? Say none of the above? I don't know. That's probably what we're saying by the sound of it. But I'm going to make two suggestions, actually. I think there has to be a monthly payment. It's 2023. There has to be a monthly payment option. I do not think that should be direct debit. You can pay everything else monthly by signing up on a card. There's loads of payment providers would do that. You know, you sign up monthly for a debit card thing, don't you? Do it on your phone.
A continuous card payment.
Thank you. Exactly. Continuous card payments. If we can't do it with our internal systems, let's find somebody who can. But I just think starting afresh with a new system, I don't care what other councils do. This is a new system, a new service. I also do not like the £10 sign up charge. I think it's completely the wrong way around. In any other commercial offering, and this is a commercial offering, you offer discounts to people to get them to sign up. You don't go over and buy a Costa and say, is this the first time you've been into Costa? Oh, we'll charge you £4 extra then. You actually try and encourage people to sign up. So if you want a firm proposal, I'm going to say it's got to be monthly, continuous debit or credit card payments, and AXA £10 sign up fee. They're my two suggestions.
Councillor Willits.
I have no further comment.
Okay. Ultimately, this is a decision that rests with the portfolio holder. You've heard tonight a collection of voices. I'm not going to put together a set of recommendations as chair tonight because it's clear there is varying views here, and for whatever reason, one member's had to leave early. So I'm not going to do that formally. I'll just make one observation, which is that if you're going to promise people that their wheelie bins will be replaced if they are faulty, then I would have thought the administrative burden of going with the second option on option B on option 1 would be the way to go, because overall, everyone overall will be paying less, and that's for everyone. So that's where I would be on a personal level, but I'm not, as chair of this panel, putting forward any formal set of words. You've heard it all. I think we've been quite no-hold bars here tonight. I hope it's been useful, and I've found it useful, and I will reiterate the point. You came here quite early on to give people an opportunity to make a position, and this conversation needs to wrap up now, and you need to go away and begin implementing in the way as you see fit. Portfolio holder Goss, it's on you now.
Chair, can I just, so from a governance point of view, I think what we're saying is that the scrutiny panel has considered the report, but you have chosen not to make any formal recommendations to the portfolio holder, but you have expressed your views on the proposal.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that all? Is everyone happy, as happy can be? Okay, I conclude the meeting. Thank you very much, officers. Thank you very much, members of the public, visiting councillors, members of the panel. Look forward to seeing you all again. Have a good and safe evening home.